right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have a very fun sponsored stream. A major shout out goes out to my friend David, member over at the Logos Academy. We've been actually talking about this for a while. And then he more recently sponsored a stream where he asked me to dive into both the legends, the theology, the symbolism, and potentially the historical reality of dragons, and looking at at least within the Christian context, as we'll talk about, the legend of fire-breathing dragons and comparing that with the river of fire of God's love. So we got a bunch of stuff to get into today. I have a bit of a opening monologue that sort of summarizes the Christian symbolism of the dragon. And we're talking about aerial reptiles. As we'll see a sort of evolution from serpents. There's a lot of academic work I was looking into, and they really shoo this away as sort of mythologized encounters with large serpents or crocodiles and stuff like that. So I'm going to go over the Christian symbolism and look at how the dragon obviously is a satanic symbol of Satan's adversarial nature, not only against God, but against humanity as well. But then we're going to look more generally at the cross-cultural references and symbolic motifs regarding dragons, because one of the things that's so interesting about dragons is that cultures, which secular history tells us had zero contact with each other, developed mythologies, legends, narrative stories about these dragons and how, at least in most cases, terrorized people, demanded human sacrifices. You will see that initially they weren't necessarily fire breathing. That's a very unique Christian emphasis. We'll see that there is instances of this association with dragons breathing fire in the Roman and Greek context, but it really gets substantiated once the church arrives on the scene. And we'll see in the Germanic and the Norse and the Russian context, in the Greek context, they all have these stories about fire-breathing dragons. Now, I can't go without mentioning, of course, the icon right behind me here is the dragon slayer par excellence, not only of Christianity, but most specifically of Holy Orthodoxy, and that is St. George. So at some point, I have a little video that kind of goes over St. George and his slaying of the dragon. And I have in my document today, because this was a tough topic. How exactly do you present on dragons? And I started going through YouTube. I found a bunch of reading material. Then I started going through YouTube to find some type of visual piece to include in the stream. And a lot of it is crap. So we're going to watch a video on St. George. The two most notable instances that I could find of a prominent podcast talking about the potential reality of dragons is an instance on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I found a short of. We'll watch that. And then a dinosaur expert on the Lex Friedman podcast. Obviously, we can't watch those full clips because those are copyrighted from their podcasts. But in my document, I first begin with the instances or the descriptions of a dragon within Scripture, both Old Testament, New Testament. Then I start getting into, the symbolism, the Christian understanding, and then what I find very interesting, and I haven't seen put together that I did put together at the end of my document, is why did dragons become discredited? And the interesting thing is that what sort of replaced the dragon, and if we just localize it to sort of Christian mythology, is the dinosaur. And so I, in my document, the last two sections is one describing the intellectual history of the West, and it's going to be tied with movement into modernity on how the dragon as a historical artifact, because I have a whole section on historical cases, both Orthodox and non-Orthodox, mostly all Christian, where these people are describing what they are writing as a literal account of dragons. So this isn't, now we're going to be getting into the symbolism, but these accounts were very, very literal. And so I have a whole, I went through and found as many instances I could and documented those. But at the end, I'm going to describe why dragons, essentially fell out of favor, or what I'm arguing, don't fit in a modernist paradigm and a sort of rationalist, mechanistic, evolutionary, Darwinian understanding of reality. But then I'm going to do an internal critique of dinosaurs to demonstrate that, there's a lot of internal critiques in regards to the logical consistency of dinosaurs themselves. Some people speculate that dinosaurs are a sort of contemporary attempt to sort of whitewash the myths of dragons and sort of represent an evolutionary framework. So we get these sort of ancient reptiles, these monstrous entities, but we're told, again, they existed millions of years ago. I think, was it 65 to 300 million years ago, we're told that dinosaurs exist. And so in prep for the stream, I was looking at tons of stuff. I found like young creationists. There's a whole swath, and I'm curious. I'm actually going to do a poll for you guys. I found a whole swath of Protestant Christians that are absolutely convinced that dinosaurs existed alongside humans within the last few thousand years, and believe that the flood of Noah, the ark, Noah's Ark, and the flood narrative, that this is what extinguished the dinosaurs. Now, I'm actually not going to be making any historical cases today for one way or the other. I will, though, undermine the assumption of dinosaurs as a historical certainty based on their own methodology. So I'm going to do an internal logical critique. It's more of a philosophical critique, just like my critique of evolution. My critique of evolution is a philosophical critique. One being that it violates its own consistency in the survival or the survival of the fittest. That, taking the example of a flying mammal, let's use a bat, for example, we're told that it evolves from a rat. Now, if that's the case, in the process to move from a rat to a bat, it must develop these appendages on his arm. But at some point in the evolutionary process, this cross-generational process in which the rat attains these appendages under its arm, it's going to not be fit for any single niche. Therefore, it would not have survived because it's not fit for any niche, and it would have gone extinct. And you can use this same logical process for eyeballs, brains, but a very notable one that people have used is flying mammals, because to move from a terrestrial mammal to a flying mammal, the process in between makes it unfit for any niche. So therefore, how does it survive? And we're told essentially what a Darwinianist would tell you is that, well, there was, at least for the first one, there was enough appendage there to make it advantageous, maybe like a flying squirrel or something like that. So I'm not convinced of that. And of course, there's no physical evidence of the leap between species, what we call macroevolution. So anyways, that's not part of today's stream, but we will be undermining that. So we got, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm going to do a poll for you guys to see what is the perspective of the chat today regarding the reality of dragons. So I have 4 options here. I have 4 options that I think are possible, and I'll tell you which one that I sort of lean towards, or one that I think is very interesting, because I really haven't made my mind up. And in attempting this stream, I try to find historical artifacts or some type of tangible evidence for dragons. I couldn't really find a whole lot. As you'll see in the clip of Joe Rogan with the guy that they have on, he argues that if there were flying dragons, and I think this is a probable argument, if there were flying serpents, dragons, their bones would be hollow, because it would have to be so that they could fly. They wouldn't be very heavy, just like we see with eagles and hawks. Predatory birds, apex predator birds, are actually very light. And this is why it's hard to find fossil remains of large birds, because their birds decompose so quickly because they're hollow, they're light. Which he argues, if there were dragons, it would make sense there wouldn't be a lot of artifacts or a fossil record of them if they did exist. So here's my 4 options for you guys, and I'm going to post the poll after we get through the monologue, and I'm going to see what you guys have to say. The four options, I think, in regards to the existence of dragons, number one would be that they are absolutely real. That when we look at the historical record, because I went to find what are historical accounts, because there had to be historical accounts of people claiming that they witnessed dragons or slayed actual physical dragons, not, because we have stories in the Orthodox world, some that are very literal and some that are more allegorical, symbolic. And I don't think one nullifies the other, but we do have accounts where people are certainly writing as if these things were very literal. So let's say the first option about dragons is that they actually did exist. They are historical entities of reality that were documented by people. And this, therefore, would explain the anomaly of all these cross-cultural references to dragons. Now, there's differences between these cross-cultural references. For example, once you get into East Asia, the attributes and the framework around dragons are very different. They believe they're auspicious. They believe they're beneficent. In China specifically, I would say one of the cultures that are most notorious for dragon symbolism, it is explicitly associated with the emperor. And as we'll see when we look through the history of dragons, that before they ever attained the attribute of breathing fire, they actually began as sort of sea creatures, a type of leviathan. And so there's all these myths around the world where they dwell in rivers or seas or some type of body of water, or they guard a treasure of this sort. And of course, in India, you have the Nagas, which is like a semi-divine entity, which they also believe is beneficent, but he can be dangerous. And he basically is the product of two deities in their Hindu pantheon, and he protects a vast swath of treasures under earth. So when you get in the Asian context, it clearly has sort of beneficent, auspicious characteristics. In the Roman and Greco context, before pre-Christian, you see that they aren't really auspicious. So in the Levant and the Mediterranean, where we have all these instances of dragons, they're not really beneficent. And of course, once Christianity takes off, we in our scripture, the Bible itself, has references to dragons, most explicitly the book of Revelation. Because as we'll look at some of the etymology, because I was curious, if you look up like how many references to dragons are there, I was getting different accounts. Some said 37, some said 47, some said 35. In the etymology in some of those words, it's referring, because in the Old Testament it's in Hebrew, and it could be a dragon, it could be a serpent, it could be some type of beast. It's kind of ambiguous, the term that's used, that especially with the King James Bible, because the King James Bible explicitly translated many of these words as dragons, because at that time we hadn't moved fully out. I mean, once we hit the 18th century, like this transition period occurs in the 17th century, where all this dragon lore basically is erased. And once we arrive in the 18th century, and because of deism and mechanistic scientific understandings, essentially there's no more room for dragons, and they become a fictitious lore. And then right around the corner, once we get into the 19th century with Darwin, dinosaurs reemerge. So in the 1840s, we start to get the discovery of dinosaurs by all these paleontologists who they themselves were interested in promoting the idea of dinosaurs. So four options whether dinosaurs or dragons exist. Number one, they did exist. They're historical, they're literal, and this is why, whether you're in Mesopotamia, whether you're in ancient China, whether you're in Japan, whether you're an Aztec or you're a Mayan, or you're in the Greco-Roman world, all these cultures had legends and pictorial iconography of dragons. That's number one. Number two is what we're told is that this is the contemporary academic religious studies secular perspective, is that what dragons are totally mythologized, fictionalized, figurative legends about human encounters with real animals in the wild. And so most of the time they chalk up dragon lore as tied to human encounters with snakes specifically. and the idea of massive, large snakes. And they account the description that these dragons breathe fire is because these serpents were venomous, and when people were bitten by it, it burned and stung, and they associated its breath and its mouth with fire itself that consumed and killed people. This is kind of the secular approach. So therefore, these are not historical in any way. These are totally mythologized and basically fictitious pictorial depictions of real animals that they encountered. I saw some scholars arguing it had to do with various crocodile species. So I'll let you guys come to your conclusion on that. Number 3 option, and this is the sort of Jungian and Jordan Peterson approach, that dragons are real in the sense that they're analogous to real aspects of the world. Now, I would say the church adopts part of this. Now, certainly not a Jordan Peterson or a Jungian perspective, but the idea, once we start getting into the symbolism of the dragon, that the symbolism of the dragon is actually real. What it represents as an antagonistic force against humanity and God is real. And that therefore the myths of dragons, just like Peterson thinks about scripture itself, may not be literal, but underneath it, it has a higher order of truth regarding the nature of reality or the spiritual world or something like that. So that's the third option. Now, I started to reflect on this, and I was thinking, well, what if, and this is the fourth option. I haven't really heard too many people make this argument for the existence of dragons, but hear me out here. So I sat and thought about it, and one of the things that came to me is, what if dragons were visibly witnessed by people? But the difference between today and all of these stories we have, basically from the 1600s back to antiquity, we have all these stories about dragons. What if, because one of the things I highlight with the discrediting of the existence of dragons is the movement towards modernity, is that because our fundamental presuppositions of the world have been so radically altered through modernity, through rationalism, through the scientific pursuits, right, through technology, that we actually cannot see entities that spiritually, literally, really exist. You're following me there? What if dragons and the dragon is actually, in a pre-modern world, people actually saw these things flying because they are real spiritual entities? That maybe the dragon, just as the book of Revelation talks about Satan, maybe a dragon is the way in which a demon or Satan appear within reality itself. And therefore, they're not totally fictitious. They're not totally mythologized, but people actually encountered real dragons, but they're spiritual entities. And this would explain then, potentially, hear me out, this would potentially explain why, as we move and we leave the 17th century, all of dragon lore is totally annihilated and it's done away with, because for a McLuhan understanding, the medium is the message, because our sensory ratios have been so altered, we actually no longer perceive things that are actually in the world as spiritual entities. I've seen, this would make sense, for example, of legends like leprechauns in Ireland or fairies across Europe and all around the world, these small little entities. What if they themselves, these sprites, these spirits, are also sort of demonic manifestations that in a pre-modern world we actually would have seen, because we have not been tainted by rationalism and science and technology, and to such a degree that we could actually witness things around us that we ourselves cannot see anymore, which would make sense if Satan is the father of lies and the greatest trick that Satan ever did was to convince people he didn't exist. Is that as we move into the modern world, the dragon itself becomes invisible to our naked eyes and begins to manifest through the systems we're building. Because when I start going through the Christian symbolism of the dragon, Oh my God, it could apply to the entire technocratic world that's being built around us. Could this be the new substantiation of the dragon itself, going further and beyond the historical semiotics we've been presented with? That's an option. We have somebody says, I'm going to go with option 5. Dragons are physically real, and those scientists keep putting their bones together. Well, that would be option 1, brother. I don't know if you listened. Option 1 is the literal existence of dragons. So that's option 1. There isn't, I mean, if you guys do have an option 5, I'd be quite interested in it, but that's what I said in option 1. So those are some things to think about as we move through today's stream, because we're going to be talking a lot about symbolism, and it is an anomaly. So this is the biggest thing going for dragons that hasn't really been resolved. And when you look, because I got TikTok videos that we're going to be watching towards the end of the stream of people who are really, really into the idea that dragons existed. None of them are really super credible, right? It's not, these aren't people that you would want to educate your children. But it's interesting how popular it is, because I myself am skeptical about dinosaurs, because I myself am totally skeptical of macroevolution in a Darwinian sense. So if dinosaurs exist, it doesn't nullify my worldview. I just believe that God would have then created them already. They did not evolve from reptiles, and birds are not, feathered dinosaurs from, the prehistoric period or something. No, God created these things. That could be a possibility. Again, dragons, dinosaurs, these things aren't dogmas of our Christian faith, but the point being is they also don't nullify our own timeline. Whether you believe the earth is 8, 7, 6,000 years old. None of this actually would nullify that worldview. It doesn't outright contradict it. So, yeah, so we got tons to get into today. I want to also say, Patrick, can you please post the table of contents of your book and at least 2 chapters? I'm not going to post 2 chapters. Heck no. I'm not going to be posting 2 chapters. I will post the table of contents gladly. But I will also say, guys, this is the goal for today. So we got 30 super chat goal today on YouTube. If we reach the goal, somebody will be receiving a copy of my book, a signed copy. I will ship it out. That will be on me. I will get the printed, the label printed, get it packaged, and get it shipped out so that you will get it before Christmas. You should get it before Christmas. It's December 16th. I'll get it out and in the mail tomorrow. So if we reach the 30 super chat goal, I want to offer somebody an opportunity to get this book for free. Now, the question I wanted to ask you guys is, should it be someone who super chatted? Does it need to be someone who super chatted to be worthy of winning the prize? Or should the group itself be worthy in that anybody in the chat could win the book? I'm curious. I was thinking about doing this maybe more frequently for streams, is offering a free winner to get access to the book, and I'll send it out. Nobody reads free. Thank you, Kristen. Hey, thank you very much, young old boy. Do appreciate it, my man. But what do you guys think? Should it be just for people who super chat? Marisa, I think it would be more fair for super chatters. Okay. Now I'm fine with that, because that does make actual sense. So what we'll do then is, if you super chat today, whether it be Dono Chat, Streamlabs, or YouTube, but of course, YouTube, we have to reach the 30 super chat goal. I will ask a question or say I'm thinking of a number, do something where somebody has to put it in the chat, and if it's right, or the closest person will get the book. And then you need to email me, though. You have to email me your address, your full name, email, and phone number if you want to get text updates. Once I ship it out, whether it be UPS or USPS, you'll get updated so you can track it yourself. So if you want that, give me your phone number. I promise I won't be spamming you, but I'll put it in the software so that you'll get updated. So that is the goal today. You just have to send in a super chat, a super chat, and maybe, I thought we'll just make it the biggest super chatter wins, but then I thought, well, that's not fair because not everybody has the same resources. So we're not going to do the biggest super chatter wins, but you do have to be a super chatter. If you super chat today and we reach the 30 super chat goal, you can be a winner. I will sign it. Again, you just contact me through email tonight. Send me churchoftheeternallogos@gmail.com. Say, hey, I'm that handle. Tell me your name, tell me your address, give me your phone number, and then I can ship it all out. So yes, USA shipping only. Thank you, Heidi B. Mary. Great point. Yes, if you're in Australia, I'm not doing, because it costs me $40 to send a book to Australia. I am not. You must be in the United States. Canada, just to ship to Canada cost me like $26. It's crazy. And I just sent out, because I don't have a limitation on my website, so you can be from anywhere and purchase my book. And I had two people, both from New South Wales and Australia, different towns, but two people on the same day purchase. I thought, what are the chances that two people on the same day purchase from Australia? Both of them, they both cost me like $42, $44 to ship. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No one in Australia. You guys are too damn expensive to ship to, but everybody in the continental United States is eligible. So thank you guys for that. Young old boy throws in $2 with the Christmas tree. Thank you very much, brother. Dano throws in $3. And chair throwing Italian throws in $5. Says, did your studies show if Chinese dragons are good at driving? I would suspect not. Because one, if they do have arms in Chinese iconography, they're just these little bitty guys. It's almost like a T-Rex. It'd be kind of hard for them to steer. So yeah, I mean, it kind of just goes along with Asian culture in general. So, the trend continues. All right. So let's see. What do I want to do first? You know what? Just to keep the rhythm of the stream, let's just do some quick housekeeping right now. Actually, no, forget it. Let's do the monologue. We'll do housekeeping after we do the monologue. All right. So here's what I want to begin with, guys. I want to talk to you about the symbolism. So whether you believe in dragons literally or not, we're going to get to that once we get to the document. I want to first talk to you about the symbolism of dragons from a Christian perspective, and then talk about how the general motifs you can find across cultures. Now, I'll say the one caveat regarding dragons is that in East Asia, they do not have a negative context. In East Asia, they are always auspicious and beneficent and potentially bestowing good luck, and typically always associated, at least in the Chinese context, with the emperor, with power, with authority, with the ability to control weather, rain, waters, this type of stuff. So East Asia is kind of its own thing, but we'll talk about it. From the Christian perspective, what is the symbolism of dragons? Well, the first one, and to be very general, is that dragons represent chaos. So they are opposed to divine order. When we look at, I have a list of 10 Orthodox saints that have legends associated with them slaying dragons in one way or another. In every instance, it has to do with them terrorizing civilization, a small village, a small city. In the case of St. George, we'll see, he finds a princess that's tied to a tree because the dragon that terrorized the city demands human sacrifice. Now he finds her, and then he takes her girdle off, which is symbolic of virginity, right? Purity. And he subdues and chokes the dragon. He's able to drag it around with her girdle. So what do we see? We see a symbolism there that the purity of those following Christ subdue the dragon, right? So we can see the spiritual warfare regarding the dragon as chaos. He is opposed to divine order, and divine order is obviously has to do with individual moral virtue. And so the dragon, though, is active and hostile to God's order. It's not a sort of passive entity that, is anti-Christ, anti-God, but he's kind of passive. He just lets things crumble. No. The dragon is the ultimate archetype of active hostility. And as we'll see, this is why even among some of the saints that are said to have slayed dragons, even the church views it as time symbolic, because there's one instance, for example, I forget the saint's name, will come to it, where he slays the dragon that's dwelling underneath the city of Rome. Well, it just so happens that this happens during the time of Constantine. So the Rome is converting from a pagan empire to a Christian empire. Could this have to do with him slaying the pagan idols of Rome? Can it deal with these pagan spiritualities being antagonistic to the divine order of Christianity? Obviously, that could work there. That would make sense. But chaos that's created by the dragon is always anti-communal. And this is a really big piece. When we start looking at the symbolism of fire and the river of fire theology of Orthodoxy, it is participatory. It unites you with God. It does not destroy the individual. But with the dragon as chaos, it resists all communion. It's always isolated, right? You may see there are depictions, especially in the Russian context, where dragons have 3, 6, 9 different heads, but it's one entity. Very rarely did I find any example of a dragon that lived with other dragons in a dragon community. No, they're almost always solitary creatures that dwell in water, that dwell in caves, that dwell in wells, or somewhere remote and mountain landscape, somewhere remote where people typically don't venture. So it's an isolated entity. It's an entity that does not represent communion and multiplicity. And this disorder seeks domination, not participation, right? And we're going to see, again, the symbolism of fire, how that all plays itself out. So the dragon, number one, is a symbol of chaos, and it's a symbol of domination through fire, through power, through authority, and is not interested in human participation at all. The only participation you get with the dragon is offering of sacrifices, which again, what does the Bible talk about? That's the whole problem with the Israelites, is they keep offering their children to Moloch and Baal, which again, we've done streams on covering the history of Moloch and Baal worship. So we see this motif, and we can see that Christianity, whenever depicting a dragon, highlights this human sacrifice element, essentially being Antichrist. Now, number two, dragon, and this is obvious, everybody would have already guessed this, the dragon as Satan or satanic power. And this is a motif throughout Scripture, right? This is really the hard crux of how the Bible uses the dragon motif. Now, as I said, there is some type of liberty that is utilized in translating these Hebrew terms into dragon, and we're already to the Old Testament. Now, into the New Testament, we do have instances where the word drakon, the Greek, which is the origins of where we use the word dragon, that's literally the etymological foundation, that is used. That's why I said dragon is specifically used in the book of Revelation. But depending on how you translate the words in the New Testament, it could be a serpent, it could be a dragon, it could be a monster. But the icon of Satan, the way that the church depicts Satan, is almost always as a dragon, at least the historical church, the Orthodox church. When we look at our Orthodox iconography, just like St. George slaying the dragon, Satan is almost always depicted as a dragon. Now, for St. George, now he was persecuted under Diocletian. Remember last week when we did a stream on St. Nicholas of Myra? St. Nicholas was imprisoned for 6 to 10 years in 306. St. George was also 3 years previously to St. Nicholas. St. George was imprisoned by Diocletian and was tortured and refused to recant his faith in Christ. So just to give you a historical context, imagine that within the same little 20-year period, we have St. George defending Christendom, refusing to recant his faith, miracles being associated with him being able to endure all the torture that Diocletian is inflicting on him because he was a soldier in the military. When they found word that St. George was Christian, they demanded immediately that he renounce his faith because Diocletian was worried. They were already persecuting Christians, but he was worried that if soldiers started to believe, this might cause a wildfire within the Roman Empire. So my point then with St. George and the dragon here is, we'll talk about the literal interpretation here, but we can also see that St. George refusing to recount his faith, living a virtuous life, the legend of him slaying an actual dragon and saving a city and rescuing a princess that was going to be sacrificed. We can see these as acts that are against the Antichrist satanic powers of this world. And so the dragon as Satan is not merely evil. It is an anti-being. What do I mean by that? It extinguishes life itself. When we look at, as we'll come to, the river of fire and the theology of fire in the Orthodox context, it is life-giving. It is participatory. It is what cleanses you and unites you with God. But in the dragon context, it's the fire that extinguishes humanity. It's the fire that causes fear and kills people, annihilates. And it represents pride, rebellion, false autonomy, and a parasitic existence. That's what the dragon is. It's a parasite because it feeds off the people of a city. And within the Christian context, it feeds off of Christians. It has to do with pride because it is the apex predator, right? What can slay a dragon? Well, notice in our Orthodox, it's only the faithful Christian that can slay the dragon. It's rebellion against God. It's a false autonomy, and this is why we'll see that even other cultures, but even specifically within the Christian context, the dragon in China, it symbolizes the emperor. Outside of China, specifically within the Christian context, it symbolizes a tyrannical ruler. So when it's associated with, for example, Nero or Diocletian or the emperor of Rome, it's associated with what full rebellion against God and false authority equals. It is like a dragon. It is an extinguishing of people. It is anti-human. It limits free will. Right? These are aspects in which the dragon acts in the world and symbolically can represent a tyrannical ruler. And so, third, the dragon as tyrannical kingship. This is my point here. The saints trample on the dragon, demonstrating that those close to God are elevated higher than the highest of worldly power. So instead of depicting, Augustus Caesar, we can use the dragon because we do believe that he is the prince of this world. Satan is the prince of this world, and he stands atop that pyramid of power. And so because of that, we depict the saints as trampling upon the serpent, just as scripture says that he's a heel biter, right? And so the dragon symbolizes illegitimate rule. It's rule that's not given by God. It's rule that's acquired through force and fear. And so kingship without humility, authority without Christ-like sacrifice. Therefore, the dragon demands tribute, human sacrifice, rule by fear, and therefore is anti-communal. It is a power that isolates. It's a fire that destroys. It's a rule that enslaves, and it's a life that feeds off death. Okay, so that's the Christian. Those are my three main symbolic interpretations from a Christian context. Now, here's my cross-cultural references that I found. So number one is, it's like our first point, it's a chaos monster. So I found in Mesopotamia, Canaan, Greece, Norse mythology, is that the dragon symbolizes an untamed natural forces. It could represent wind, rain, storms, even fire, wildfires, anything that is an untamed natural force, they could depict as a dragon. Anything that's anti-civilization. So as I said, specifically in the Mesopotamia, Canaan, Greek, and Norse context, all pre-Christian here, they use the dragon to symbolize a force that is against human civilization itself. And they also depicted in a lot of their sort of cosmological myths, I found that the dragon is used to, again, represent this sort of pre-cosmic chaos that, again, whatever pantheon you're talking about, is they'll have a deity, a creator type deity, or a deity of order. and that he sort of nullifies the existence of the dragon, this primordial chaos, and sort of relegates the dragon to its cave, to its, to its dwelling place, and is no longer has authority over the whole world. Now, another one I found is the guardians of thresholds. This is where we get this association that dragons protect treasures and many other things. So I found examples where dragons are just like the Nagas in India, but there's all these other legends, and we find them in Europe as well, that the dragon protects treasures, that it surrounds sacred trees. I found in some of the pagan myths, that it's associated with springs. As I said, the primordial understanding of dragons is actually that they're sort of water serpents, major massive reptiles that actually emerge out of water, which I would say from our Christian context, maybe we would refer to it as the Leviathan more so than a dragon. But the same Hebrew words are used for both, so it can kind of go, or they're different, but they could be translated the same way. And they represent the space between worlds. So dragons mark essentially liminal space, the space between life and death, the space between poverty and wealth, right? That's why they guard treasures. They sometimes surround, like the stories, you see it in Shrek, right? The princess that's in a castle tower that's guarded by a dragon, and that the prince must come and slay the dragon so he can get the girl. It's the liminal space between a single man into a matured married man, or a man who wins his bride, gains his social status, right? The dragon typically always occupies a space of liminality. And so the dragon then tests worthiness. This is where we get all these fairy tales about princes. It tests the worthiness of the warrior, of the soldier, of the prince to acquire his bride. It, as I said, marks the distinction between life and death, known and unknown, right? So what I found in some of these pagan myths is that it really just demarcates the known world from the unknown world. And this is going to tie into the disappearance of dragon lore in the 17th and 18th century, because many at that time, especially in the 18th century, they believed that because they had already circumnavigated the globe, that, and especially with the development of cartography and maps, that there was no sort of hidden space on Earth anymore, that it's all been mapped, it's all been covered. And so there was no unknown territory anymore. And in this sense, you see the people that are part of this process depict the lore of dragons as superstition regarding the unknown. And then the last one that is something that you can find in almost all of them is that it's a demarcator between human and divine. And that's the same, and we can find this within our Orthodox saints, because just like St. George, he is only a human man, right? And all the humans, and we can assume that many of them are Christians in a town that's being terrified, is terrified of the dragon, that they can't really do anything against it. And that's where in every instance within the Christian tradition, we find it's a Christian that appeals to God, and through his fidelity to Christ and being moral and virtuous, he's able to slay the dragon. And so even in our context, as Christian context, the dragon is a sort of liminal space between the limitation of human power and the triumphantness of divine power. And that men, saints, can actually transgress this, and through participation with God, actually triumph over the dragon itself. Number 3 is embodied power. The dragon is a concentration of strength, longevity, dominion, mastery over the elements. And so who actually controls the dragon? That's why the dragon is the sort of ultimate archetype of pride, because if it was real, it had no competitors. There was no predator that was going to outpace the dragon. The dragon is the ultimate archetype of strength, of longevity, of dominion, and mastery over the earth itself. And so because nobody can control the dragon, the only thing that can subdue the dragon is God himself. And then the 4th one is this cosmic administrators. And this is the specific East Asian context. So as I said, Chinese dragons are very auspicious. They're beneficent. They're beneficial. They maintain order. It's one of the few instances in when dragons are utilized not in the chaotic motif. Almost all the legends use dragons in a chaotic motif except East Asia. And so for them, the dragon is an archetype of, or at least associated with rain, with water, bodies of water, with fertility, with balance, and for them, heaven's mandate. Now, what is heaven's mandate? In Chinese culture, Zhongguo, which is the Chinese word for China, means Middle Earth. In the Chinese context, they believe that China was the center of the world, and that there's essentially a divine pillar, a divine mandate from heaven that the world moves around China. And that's why then the emperor was believed to be the most powerful man on earth, which then signifies why the dragon symbolizes the emperor and the dragon symbolizes heaven's mandate. So they are, as I said, beneficent. They're non-apocalyptic. You do not find apocalyptic narratives regarding dragons in the East Asian context. And they are essentially integrated into their formation of a cosmic harmony. And they maintain this balance and order. So that it's sort of a unique novelty. Now, I'm going to come to how the church fathers and how the church views these pagan traditions and their utilization of dragons. The fifth one that I have, though, before we conclude on the symbolism cross-culturally, is the shadow of the sacred. Now, this is mostly the Jungian approach. This is also, I would say, a sort of Jordan Petersonian approach, is that the dragon embodies the terrifying aspect of the divine. Now, again, as we'll see from an Orthodox standpoint, this is very, very skeptical. We're very skeptical of this because the dragon is nothing of the divine. It's actually anti-divine. And the Christian tradition most explicitly pronounces this. Out of all the religions, it's the Christian tradition that really characterized the dragon as fire breathing and really, really submits the dragon as Antichrist in some sense. But in the Jungian terms, they actually venerate a type of dragon, that the dragon is this, again, a liminal force, a psychological archetype that represents the terrifying mysterium tremendum, right, of Rudolf Otto, the terrifying mystery of the divine. And so because dragons are terrifying, Jung argues that the dragons then are real as an archetype within our psychological map of our relationship to divinity and how divinity is very, very scary and terrifying. Now, whether you find that convincing or not, I'll leave that up to you guys. But the danger of approaching transcendence is how Jung described what the dragon actually means, and that it's a sacred, and it's sacred, it has sacred power, but it's not safe. And that really, I would say, the mythology that I encountered that most signifies this is the Indian legends of Nagas. This serpentine, dragon-like god that guards these massive wealths of treasure that are underground. Because in the Indian context, he is beneficent, but he can also be very, very dangerous, right? You don't get that same danger motif in East Asia, but in India, it's like, no, he's really God. He's really good. He's a semi-divine being. He's almost, he is kind of part of the pantheon, but he's not fully part of the pantheon. And he's anthropomorphized. He's like half human, half serpent. But the Nagas, like I said, is both beneficent, but also very, very dangerous. You must approach the Nagas very, cautiously and reverently. And so for Jung, then, the dragon represents the fatality of man who approaches the divinity in the wrong way. That if you approach God falsely, what occurs is a fatality of yourself. And so that's what he chalked up the dragon to. Now, how does the church respond to all these cross-cultural references? Pagan cultures definitely encountered real power. The church recognizes that whatever is behind the dragon lore, the dragon mythology, the dragon archetypes, we believe that it's still our framework. It still is a satanic force. It's a real demonic entity. And that whether they're in China, whether they're in India, Mesopotamia, Aztecs, Mayans, and Machu Picchu, what they encountered in Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan is a real spiritual fallen force. And so because they were pagans and because they didn't have the revelation of Christ, they began to venerate and worship something that was real, but was the inversion of the true God. And so they misidentified the source of the spiritual realm and began to associate the real manifesting powers of the demonic as their God, as the true God. And so they experienced a sort of fallen spiritual power, a chaotic natural forces, and tyrannical political power, and viewed that power as legitimate and good. And so we would argue, as the church, is what they did is they misrecognized evil. And it had to do with their failure to know the one true God, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, from there, I want to talk to you guys about the symbolism of fire, because I have a whole section in my document that we'll go over. I was curious of when did the fire motifs begin? And one of the things that I was shocked by is that there are instances of them, as I said, in the ancient Roman and Greco world. However, the vast majority of instances where dragons are said to be fire breathing are almost always in Christian cultures. And so what exactly could you use to explain this? And what I want to present to you guys is the theology of the river of fire. The river of fire. Have you guys heard this before? I've talked about it before on stream. And if you haven't, I actually have a link where you can go download the work titled The River of Fire. And you can then learn a little bit more about how we as Orthodox Christians understand God's uncreated fire. And so to use the first metaphor here to get our framework is, and I've said this before, so forgive me if you guys have already heard this, is God's fire is a fire that doesn't burn the repentful. And so you and I are like swords, and God is like an open flame. And I have all these biblical references that we'll see here in regards to the God's fire present in the world, how he manifests himself in Exodus as the burning bush, a flame that doesn't consume, it doesn't burn, right? And I'm going to show you a video of the holy flame. We're not going to be focusing on it. I've done a whole stream on the holy fire and Pentecost and all this different stuff, but I will show you to emphasize this point about the created versus uncreated fire, is that when holy fire descends on Pascha in Jerusalem, I have videos where you can see people putting their beard in the flame. It's not burning its hair. You have women literally putting the clothes of their arm in the flame. It's not burning their clothes. And so God's flame is a fire that doesn't consume. So using the metaphor that you and I are swords, we, through sin, get detritus on us. And we must then be placed back into the fire, God's love. God's love is a river of fire. And through our repentance, God's love always forgives, but it burns away the sins. It burns away the detritus. It allows the sword to be heated up with the energy of the fire to attain the same temperature. It's filled with the same energy. Energetically, the sword becomes identical to the flame, but the sword is not the flame. The sword is in the flame. And this is a metaphor for how we then relate back to God. And that this is how we understand our soteriology, is that you and I are making the decisions on whether we're saved or not today. And if someone is unrepentant, if someone denies Christ and denies the sins they've committed, God's love burns. It hurts because they are resistant to God's love actually purifying them from the worldly desires and the sinful temptations that they've been so accustomed to. And this is where you can eventually acquire a hard heart. And this is what we believe to be the fire of Gehenna. And I got biblical verses for all this stuff in the church fathers talking about it, that you, through faith in Christ, through repentance, through theosis, which is this energetic process, right? The sword in the flame is theosis, love, good, life, logic, reason, honor, glory, all these different things. When we embody them, that energy purifies us and we become more like Christ, like the sword in the flame. Now, when we get to the created versus uncreated, that is God's uncreated fire. And this comes from, like I said, this document called the River of Fire that I'm going to give you the link to. You guys can read it. It's like 26 pages. It's a great read. And it's breaking down the biblical symbolism of fire and demonstrating from an Orthodox phronema, what does it all mean? And then giving everything that I just said, backing that up with scriptural references, how God is a consuming fire. Right? But it only consumes those who don't want to belong to him. That's why they burn in Hades and hell. That's what the judgment is. That's what the lake of fire is. That's the irony of the dragon in the book of Revelation, is that its created flame, the dragon that breathes fire, is then killed and extinguished by the true uncreated fire. The river of fire, the lake of fire in Revelation, that God throws Satan into the lake of fire. Well, he is going to burn because he's absolutely unrepentful. And so the irony is that the dragon is actually extinguished by both fire, which it then also extinguishes other people with. But the difference is that the dragon's flame is created and God's fire is uncreated. So let me explain this stuff to you. So God's fire transforms the person. When a human encounters divine fire, the ego is burned away through repentance, right? The pride that then is filled through the sins that we engage with is nullified through the repentant acts we have, through the acts of confession with your priest. This is putting your sword back into the flame of God. The person becomes transparent. They're purified. God's love, which is a fire, purifies us. And love expands the soul's capacity. This is why repentance is called purification. The fire hurts but heals. You know, it hurts temporarily. Maybe confessing something that you've done is, I don't want to say traumatic, but maybe difficult at first, but afterwards you always feel better. It exposes, but it restores you back to wholeness, right? You expose the flaws, but you're restored back to wholeness. It burns, but does not annihilate. It burns the sickness off. It burns the death off. It burns the detritus on the sword off, so the sword is pure and it's ready for battle. The dragon fire annihilates the person. Dragon fire does the exact opposite. It reduces the human to victim, to ash, to silence. It has nothing to do with revealing truth. And in fact, it erases memory, culture, and meaning. Therefore, and as we move through this fire of the dragon, think about this. When my metaphor is that maybe the dragon is the way in which Satan and demons are presented to the pre-modern mind when they actually see these entities, and in the modern framework. So the idea here is there's like a tribe in Africa that doesn't have the word for the color blue. And because of that, they actually don't see the color blue. Now, imagine if, again, our presuppositions shape our perceptive abilities. Living in a modernist worldview and a modernist mindset may prevent us from actually seeing spiritual realities that are all around us that our ancient ancestors actually saw and witnessed. And so it was literal, but it was spiritual, if that makes sense. So now in the modern world, it's like the serpent is the globalist structure itself. It's the technocracy that's wanting to erase our memory. Think about technology. Think about attention spans. Think about people living in the moment now through consumerism and hedonism. Think about the erasing of culture through multiculturalism. And think about the meaning crisis that nobody has. You know, nihilism is all the rave right now because nobody has transcendent meaning. This is why the dragon in medieval accounts burn treasure halls, burn fields, burns the future. And Beowulf, the dragon's fire, melts shields, destroys inheritance in civilization. This is not purification, it is entropy weaponized. The moral theology, love versus power. God's fire is love that respects freedom and never coerces, never dominates, never forces communion. To be purified by God's fire, God's love, you must willfully want that. You have to willfully repent. This is why heaven and hell are the same fire. The difference lies in response, not force. How you relate to God and your desire to be like him determines how you experience his love. People who hate God will hate his love and be burned by it forever. There's a great line in the River of Fire where it talks about, you know, imagine you loving your father When your father gives you a hug, you are embraced, you're warm, there's a warmth to it. You enjoy it, you love it. If you hate and despise your dad and mock your father, when he goes to give you a hug, you're like wanting to get away from it. It's annoying. It's something that may in some way cause emotional distress or pain. That is the same way we relate to the Godhead. The dragon fire is power that destroys freedom. It forces submission. It burns resistance. It makes fear the governing principle. Again, think about the dragon and how it relates to our society today. It's like the dragon has moved from a spiritual force that people saw to a mechanical structure in the attempt that we no longer see it, right? We no longer see Satan to the same degree. It's like the spiritual reality has become visible. The greatest lie is that Satan's convinced us he doesn't exist. But now he exists in the mechanical world we're building around us. Dragons rule by terror, scarcity, and destruction. Dragon fire is anti-love because love cannot exist where fear reigns. Eschatologically, the two fires at the end, the river of fire of God. At the last judgment, God does not send fire from elsewhere. Fire flows from his throne. It reveals all things. This fire is the light of the saints, is torment for those who hate God's love, is inescapable because God is inescapable. And then the dragon is always temporary. In Revelation, the dragon uses fire, the dragon destroys, but the dragon is ultimately cast into God's fire, God's love. This is the key irony. The dragon is destroyed by the very element it counterfeits. And dragon fire cannot endure because it has no source in love. It consumes itself and it collapses into nothingness, non-being. That's why I began the symbolism talking about how the dragon as an archetype is anti-being in a very literal way. And though the symbolic theology, why dragons breathe fire, from an Orthodox lens, dragons breathe fire because they imitate divine power without divine love. They externalize inner corruption and they weaponize what should purify people. Dragon fire is essentially stolen fire. It's a Promethean fire. It's a fire without self-gift. Therefore, it's essentially Luciferianism. And Luciferianism is rampant in our day today. So that's my point, is the difference between these motifs of fire is really interesting, that it's the Christian civilizations that associate the dragon with breathing fire. And it's only the Christian religion, and really only explicitly the Orthodox faith, that has this whole theology that God's love is fire. And then the dragon just perfectly represents the inversion of it. It perfectly represents the inversion of God himself. So that's a little bit on the distinction between God's love and the dragon. And I would say the first real instance of the dragon in Scripture, although it's not translated as dragon, is the Garden of Eden, because the serpent is not a neutral animal. In Genesis 3:1, it reads, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord had made." From the very beginning, the serpent is personal, intelligent, oppositional, transgressive, right? The serpent is a vehicle for, or the manifestation of, Satan himself. What Revelation later calls the ancient serpent, the dragon, Revelation 12:9. So why the serpent and not a lion or a wolf? It has to do with the fact that a serpent is, chthonic, has chthonic powers from below. It's not above. It's a hidden movement, poison rather than force, subtle domination rather than an open violence. And, God's fire is present but unnamed in the garden. Adam and Eve live in direct communion with God. They walk with God. This is uncreated energy through not yet called fire. And then we get the false promise of Satan as the serpent, as the dragon, promising that you will become God, right? You will know all things. Again, this Luciferian Promethean promise playing itself out, right? Just think of the symbolism that I just laid forth. And then knowledge without fire, properly ordered, is knowledge of, let me rephrase that. Hold on. knowledge of good and evil is not evil in itself. The problem is Adam and Eve took it without God wishing it to be so yet. They were juvenile in their development. It is taken without ascetic preparation. We believe, I've heard the metaphor of clergy say that you don't give steak to a baby. So Adam and Eve would eventually eat from the tree of knowledge. They would eventually, and what we're doing now through the Eucharist, eating from the tree of life. But they weren't ready for the tree of knowledge, and so they choked on it. And so then we get the first fire symbolism of God, where we see the cherubim, right? God kicks Adam and Eve out of paradise, out of direct communion with him, out of the idealized, world before the fall. And so here in Genesis 3:24, I was finding the verse, he placed the cherubim in a flaming sword, which turned every way to guard the way of the tree of life. So God's love, the flaming sword, prevented Adam and Eve from eating immortality in a corrupted state, becoming eternally burned by false light or false fire. So we see that symbolism of the fire that I just laid out, then present even in what I would argue is the beginning of the dragon motif within a Christian context, right there in Genesis 3. And so the dragon cannot cross the fire, right? The dragon is always beneath the cherubim. It's cast down by angelic fire. And the fire belongs to God, not the serpent. So that's my little opening monologue there on the symbolism of the dragon, the symbolism of fire as it relates to our Orthodox faith, and then highlighting how we can really see this narrative beginning in Eden. And as you guys know, I've talked many times, I don't mean to repeat myself, about how Adam really represents this sort of inverted form of masculinity. The tongue-in-cheek phrase, he's the first simp. But seriously, he follows Eve, who follows the dragon, follows the serpent, follows the devil, and I mean, if you read Genesis 3, it's because Eve saw it as so pretty, right? Women are way more susceptible by what they see, right? They don't really see beyond the superficial front. And so she saw these beautiful, the beautiful fruit of the tree of knowledge, and then it just took a little temptation by Satan for her to go ahead and bite it. And then, of course, Adam, who should be directed towards God, then follows Eve, and we then have the whole fall of creation itself. So anyways, smash that like, guys. That was my opening monologue. I didn't mean for it to take an hour and 13 minutes, but you know how I am. So it was a little bit verbose, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. I do want to remind everyone, if we reach the super chat goal of 30 super chats, I will be choosing someone who is a super chatter to receive a free copy of my book, Return to Babylon, From Adam to Antichrist. So again, that is only if we reach the 30 super chat goal here on YouTube. But let me just check and catch up with everyone real quick. Heidi B. Mary throws in 10 over on Dono Chat. Thank you so much. Heidi B. Mary says, another great stream. Thank you, DPH and David for sponsoring today's stream. Again, a major thank you goes out to David for sponsoring today's stream. What a fantastic topic. He asked me, have you ever done a stream on dragons and fire? I was like, well, I've done a lot of streams talking about, kind of the river of fire or fire in general, but no, nothing specific. He's like, I would like you to break down dragons. I was like, okay, I've never actually dove into that topic. So thank you very much, Heidi. Do appreciate it. And then over here on YouTube, I already said that one. Chris Knob throws in 2, says, looking forward to getting your book for friends. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate that. Oh, a very generous super chat comes in from Red Fox. Hey, thank you so much, brother, for the generous $100 super chat. He says, support for your channel. Thank you, brother. Really appreciate it. Hey, Red Fox, by the way, Red Fox is over in the Logos Academy. We have the meeting for the first session going over lecture 1 and lecture 2 of the Orthodox Survival course tomorrow at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you guys want to join that, you must sign up over at the Logos Academy. So it's a men's only community. Sorry, ladies, but this is a men's only reading in the Logos Academy, working through the Orthodox Survival Course of Father Seraphim Rose, which is a over 200-page PDF. And it is basically doing intellectual history from the Middle Ages of the West forward to the present day, New Age, spirituality, stuff like that. So Red Fox, if you're available, go sign, or you're already signed up. Go make sure that you're able to attend tomorrow if you're available. We'd love to have you. And again, the document for the downloads right here on the website. So if anybody's interested in joining us for a reading through the Orthodox Survival Course, check out that link right there. Sign up. We'd love to have you. Also, major thank you to David today for sponsoring today's stream. If you have a stream you'd like to sponsor, you can do so with this link right here, and I'll reach out to you and you can clarify the topic or what you kind of had in mind. If anybody's interested in setting up a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. Be happy to get in a private Zoom meeting and talk with you about whatever your heart desires. And if you're interested in my book, I only have, outside of this copy, I have 3 more copies left in my possession that I could send out. So if you want a signed copy, I only have 4 copies left until my new box arrives of 30 author copies arrive. So get those while you can, and I'm going to get those out immediately. So you should get them before Christmas if you go ahead and purchase. But one of them is going to be given away for free to the chat today if we reach the 30 super chat goal. So you can get that at the website, or you can always just buy it from Amazon. And Amazon is a little bit cheaper. But I got a request for you guys. Please, if you've bought my book from Amazon, leave me a review, a 5-star review. I just talked with a marketing guy the other day, and he liked my book. And he told me, hey, if you really want to get it spread around, you want more people to buy it, you got to get 100 reviews on Amazon. And I was like, well, I've told people. And I said, well, I got 22. And he's like, yeah, you need 88 more, because the way that the Amazon algorithm works is you have to get like high numbers of reviews. And if it's really high quality and you have a lot of 5 stars, Amazon will do the legwork of promoting your book for you to people. But right now I got 22. So if you guys have, I kindly ask in the Christmas season, if you could just give me a 5-star review, I would greatly appreciate that. And last thing, if you guys are interested in some peptides, use promo code CODAL. Again, Level Up Health, high quality peptides will, there we go. High quality peptides. I'm taking BPC 157. Really, really like it. Highly recommend if anybody's interested. And also, if you want any Orthodox items, use promo code CODAL over at orthodoxdepot.com, and you can get a discount on anything over there. Prayer ropes, incense lamps, t-shirts, flags, stuff like that. So, all right. AC throws in $20. Thank you so much, AC. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate it. Hobo Sorcerer throws in 10, said, do you think demons can manifest physically in reality? I think they can manifest physically through us. I believe that you can perform, ritual magic, and you can indwell a demon within a non-animate object, like the whole Harry Potter Horcrux thing. I do believe that's the case. I mean, the book of Asclepius is all about, in the Hermetic Corpus, is about Hermes Trismegistus teaching Asclepius how to indwell demons in our context into statuary so that they have a physical form. So spiritual warfare is all about the demons taking possession of our physical body so they have physical agency in the world. But to my point about dragons, I do believe that it's very possible that if we lived in a earlier time and we weren't so tainted by rationalism and modernity, that maybe we would see demons in their spiritual form, right? So I don't think they necessarily have physical form in the material sense that we have, but I could imagine the entire dragon lore has to do with pre-modern peoples around the world actually seeing something that they could actually perceive, and it had to do with a spiritual reality. And some cultures, like the Chinese in East Asia, venerated this as a beneficent entity that gave power to the emperor, or worshipped in the Mesoamerican context, Quetzalcoatl, and it being the sort of feathered serpent deity. But in the Roman, Greco, and specifically the Christian context, it's always been associated with an order, with a deity or an entity of chaos and destruction, and essentially something that is Antichrist. So I don't know if demons can, I don't believe demons can manifest physically without through us or a ritual in which it indwells into a non-animate object. Throwing Italian throws in 10 says, in Dark Souls, a Japanese game, humans found the first flame and harnessed its power to destroy the dragons, subjugating them. When humans tried to make the flame, they created demon kind. Oh, interesting. I was not aware of that. Thank you very much, Chair Throwing Italian. Mista Fista throws in 20, says, dragons are definitely real. I had dragon dumplings last night and have been burning internally with fire all morning. I don't know if that's the one we were talking about there, Mr. Fista. I think it sounds like you got a case of the bubble guts. That's a little bit of a different dragon you're riding, my man. But funny nonetheless. Oh, Rachel's here. Shout out to my sister, Rachel Wilson. God bless you and Andrew. He says, I bought a copy of your book for my priest, and it is blowing his mind. He gives me regular updates on how much he loves it. I also bought a copy for the parish and recommend everyone else to do the same. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate that. And I love that your priest is enjoying it. I've met your priest. I was with Rachel, Andrew, and the girls when they got baptized, and their priest was a really cool guy, really genuine man. And I talked with Father Peter Hears. And I talked with, who was it? I just spoke with someone, and their priest had my book, and he said, I didn't even know my priest knew of you. He was talking to me, and he said, yeah, he had your book on his desk, and he spoke really glowingly of it. And I said, wow, thank you. So at least with Rachel, that anecdote I had, and then Father Peter, at least I know 3 priests that appreciate it. So hopefully more clergy can get a hold of it. But thank you, Rachel, so much. God bless you, sister. Merry Christmas to you and the family. Blessed Nativity. Hope you guys are enjoying your new life down south. We miss you in the cold, Rachel. Don't you miss all the snow? Don't you miss all the snow, Rachel? RN ICXC Nika throws in almost $3, says, just finished Return to Babylon. Brilliant work. Thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Yeah. I think you're maybe one of the first people that told me they've totally finished the whole thing. Most people tell me, yeah, I'm like two chapters in or halfway through or just finished the 3rd, but thank you very much, brother. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Gooberang throws in 10, says, this reminds me of a dream I had recently about me putting out a fire I started, then defeating a hidden dragon's army, then the white Chinese dragon bestowing a floating purple orb on my head. Man, I don't even know what to say about that dream. Dano throws in 10, Orthodox Cross. Thank you very much, brother. Really appreciate that. And let me check Streamlabs real quick before we move forward. And looks like Disgruntled Docs. Shout out to Disgruntled Docs. God bless you, brother. Merry Christmas to you and your family as well. He said, dragons looking for treasure and have small hands to rub together. Coincidence? James B. Interesting topic. Let go. Thank you very much, James B., for the super chat. Really appreciate your support. Okay. All right. What is the next thing that I want to get into now? Let me pull up my documents here. And so I think we'll just begin from the top of what I had planned. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We're already an hour and a half into the stream. You want to hear something that's really strange? Whenever I do these streams, I was telling somebody, I was talking with a guy at church. He's actually a police officer, a friend of mine, and said, I watch your streams. And, sometimes you're kind of over my head. And so it's like, he said, it's amazing. You just talk for like 3 hours at a time. And I said, you want to know something strange? Is every single time I do one of these streams, I have a fear that I'm going to run out of something to talk about. I legitimately do. because I always pray before I do a stream. I always ask the Holy Spirit, please inspire me, and hopefully it's beneficial for God. I ask His will be done. But I always have this fear that I'm going to come on here and I'm going to not know what to say, or nothing's going to come out, or I feel like there's just the whole stream comes to a halt. It's never happened, but I I legitimately have those thoughts almost every time I do a stream. Dan Vicious throws in 5, says, sorry, this is unrelated. What is the symbolic meaning of circumcision? What is the Orthodox view or prescription of symbolic or actual circumcision? Well, circumcision in the Old Testament had to do with a ritual marking of those abiding by the first covenant. In the Council of Jerusalem, in the book of Acts, we actually do away with circumcision. So the Orthodox Church does not promote circumcision. The only, most places where you find circumcision, or you could say civilizations that promote the idea of a Judeo-Christian world, a Judeo-Christian civilization, it's mostly only those places that actually promote circumcision. So from an Orthodox perspective, it is totally unnecessary. And I've seen very compelling arguments that it's basically another form of genital mutilation, at least within the present period, because there's no, unless you are still a rabbinic Talmudic Jew who abides by those ritual laws, okay. But for the rest of the world to do it, and we're told it's for hygiene purposes or aesthetic purposes, there's all these problems that occur every year with little boys that get circumcised. So my boys, God willing, I have any, they will not be circumcised because they're Christian, and Christians, we do not believe in circumcision anymore. So anyways, hope that helps. Okay. All right. So my document here, I want to walk you guys through a little bit of this, and this is going to give you a historical framework. I want my hood back. Oh, man. You guys are hilarious. Okay. Dragons in the Bible here. So the original language terms, we're going to move through this document quickly. We're going to skip the whole section on the fire symbolism because I've already showed you guys that. But the primary Hebrew words involved are tannin or tannim, and it can mean serpent, dragon, sea monster, great reptilian creature, used for chaotic creatures, destructive beings, sometimes desert monsters. Appears approximately 14 to 15 times in the Hebrew Bible. Here's the few examples I could find: Genesis 1, Exodus 7, Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 74, Isaiah 27, and Jeremiah 51. In regards to the word for Leviathan, who, again, as I said, we'll look here, that dragons actually began as sort of sea monsters. A specific named chaos dragon, multi-headed, sea-dwelling, explicitly hostile, appears 6 times: Job 3, Job 41, Psalm 74, Psalm 104, and Isaiah 27. Leviathan is clearly a dragon-type being, not a normal animal. And then in the Greek context, the Greek New Testament, as I said, the word for dragon comes from drakon, the Greek word. This is the clearest and least ambiguous term because it literally means dragon. And it's used only in the apocalyptic text. So 9 times it appears in the book of Revelation. Revelation 12, 4, 7, 9, 13, 16, 17. And then Revelation 13, 2 and 4, Revelation 20, verse 2, and Revelation 12, 19 explicitly defines it, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. Here, dragon is not poetic. It is a personal ontological being. So in the book of Revelation, it is referring to a specific dragon in association with Satan. Now, English Bible count, so New King James Version, we see it appears 34 times in the Old Testament, a total of 43 references. So major dragon slaying saints, as I said, par excellence, there's no competition. The number one dragon slaying saint in the Orthodox Church is Saint George the Great Martyr. reposed in 303. Remember I talked about how it was 303 to 306 that St. Nicholas of Myra was incarcerated by Diocletian and held in prison for 6 to 10 years. Again, we don't exactly know how long, at least 6 years, though, we believe, in a cell that was very small and dark, right? The ancient Roman world wasn't great to its prisoners. But St. George was also persecuted under Diocletian. That's where his martyrdom actually occurs, is under Diocletian. But for St. George's story of slaying the dragon, we have it in Greek, Syriac, and Arabic Vitae. We have it in the Byzantine Synaxaria. We have it later medieval elaborations in both in the Byzantine East and the Latin West. So a dragon terrorizes a city, often near water, demands human victims. St. George wounds or subdues it. It is killed and the city converts. It's universally commemorated. As I'll show you, there are some legends of saints with dragons that are much more regional or more local narratives. They're not universally recognized by the church like St. George is. And the dragon obviously is present in all iconography. The church never defines what exactly the dragon was. Was it a real dragon? Was it demonic? Was it a hybrid? Was it symbolic? Is it Satan? But what is affirmed is the real danger and real deliverance. And so I just feel like because today's stream is about dragon slaying, I feel obligated that we must watch at least this 8-minute video on St. George, because when else are we going to watch it? I mean, if we're going to be talking about dragons, we better actually have the most notorious dragon slayer of all time. So let me pull this up real quick. We'll watch this quick video and then we'll get back. This is Genesis 3. This is where I was pulling the narrative of the fall here. This is a little interesting thing is Vlad Dracula was part of the Order of the Dragon. So I was looking at like secret societies of dragons and stuff like that. One of the most notable ones was a monarchical chivalric order only for selected higher aristocracy. And we can see that in Wallachia, Vlad II, Vlad Tepes, his son, Vlad the Impaler, took their name Dracul from the Order of the Dragon. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Here is the holy fire that I wanted to show you guys. And I want you to see how it doesn't burn, right? Related to that symbolism of the dragon's fire burning, it killing, it perishes people. Look at the holy fire in this context. You see people she's putting her arm in the flame. See how it doesn't burn her shirt? This is the flame of God that does not consume and does not burn. Anyways, anyway, just wanted to show you guys that real quick. Okay, now let's play this video of St. George, because if you guys haven't heard of the story of St. George, it is definitely worth being familiar with. I mean, he's one of my favorite saints. He's obviously one of the, if not the most notorious warrior saint of the church, but he's obviously the most notorious dragon slayer probably in history, honestly. I mean, cross-culturally, is there a single person that exemplifies the slaying, or at least has a myth associated, whether you think it's a myth or not, a narrative associated with slaying dragons that is more famous than St. George? I can't think of one. So we're going to watch this isn't an Orthodox channel. I couldn't find a short Orthodox video. Trisagion Films has a good one on St. George, but it's like 20-some, almost 30 minutes long. I don't want to put you guys through that. I got so much other stuff I want to get into. So we're just going to watch this quick video just in honoring of St. George, the great dragon slayer.
Saint in the world. He is the patron of hundreds of cities around the world, and surely one of the most beloved saints among the Catholic and Orthodox churches. He is often portrayed riding a white horse and dressed as a Roman soldier piercing a dragon with a spear. St. George is an iconic character in the struggle between good and evil, representing courage, faith, and warding off adversity. Today's video shows us more about the amazing story of this saint loved by millions of people worldwide. Born in Cappadocia, Turkey, his story is steeped in legend and mystery. Born to Christian parents of Greek nobility, George was raised in a profoundly pious household, molding his faith and character from an early age. When he was 14, George suffered the loss of his father, who was a Roman legionary officer, something that impacted deeply on his life. He moved with his mother to Palestine, where his bonds with the Christian faith grew stronger. This stage in his life was marred by loneliness and the quest for a greater purpose, guided by his religious heritage. When he was 17, and following in his father's footsteps, George joined the Roman army. His military career took off in the imperial city of Nicomedia, in eastern Turkey. There, he showed courage and honor, qualities that quickly made him stand out among his peers. George's ability and loyalty did not go without notice, leading to his promotion to tribune and the highly prestigious rank of imperial guard under Emperor Diocletian. This appointment was not only a testament to his military prowess, but also showed the trust the powerful Roman emperor had in him. But Diocletian still revered the old Roman gods, and after having made an inquiry to the oracle, he began a widespread persecution campaign against the Christians. He destroyed churches and imprisoned priests. George's allegiance was challenged halfway through the anti-Christian campaign. George, steadfast in his faith, defied the emperor, rejecting the anti-Christian laws and openly declaring himself a Christian. This brave act of faith led to his imprisonment, and this decisive moment would define the rest of his life. When he bravely rebelled against Diocletian, St. George was locked up and subjected to...
This is one of the terrifying tortures that the Romans use. They put St. George on a wheel like this, and then they had all these like knives, metal spikes that would tear flesh, and they would turn the wheel so that you would slowly they would have like knives, and you would be tied to it, and they would slowly turn it where it would cut you. And as it's going to talk about, there's the church describes these miracles that would occur, that every time they tortured St. George, he claimed Christ would visit him at night, and miraculously, many of his wounds would actually be healed.
To unthinkable torment. According to accounts, he was forcibly fed poisons. His body was crushed between two wheels studded with metal spikes and other cruel and inconceivable acts of torture. But miraculously, none of these atrocities took George's life, as he was protected by the Creator himself. Every night, Jesus is said to have come to heal his wounds, bolstering his faith and resilience. Although facing imminent death, George stood his ground in his belief, rejecting all of Diocletian's attempts to make him abandon his faith, including offerings of pardon and gifts such as land, money, and slaves. Having seen George's unwavering faith, Diocletian decided to have him executed. On April 23, 303, George was beheaded on the walls of Nicomedia. His death not only signaled the end of a devout and valiant life, but also the beginning of a legacy that would last for centuries. He became a Christian symbol of resistance, inspiring countless others with his fortitude and selflessness, despite extreme suffering. The well-known legend of how St. George faced a dragon only emerged in the 12th century, many years after his death. In desperate times, a distant city endured the shadows of a terrible dragon. The flame...
And that's why I said this isn't an Orthodox channel, and that's not exactly true. There were stories about well before the 12th century. So this is a non-believer. He's probably not familiar with the Orthodox tradition, but our tradition actually describes earlier the legend of St. George slaying the dragon. It doesn't just appear in the 12th century.
Flames of its fury burned the sky, and its breath was a billowing death cloud. Human sacrifices were made daily to appease the beast's rage. Sadness and hopelessness engulfed the city as one young girl after another was delivered to a grim fate. The king himself had to sacrifice his daughter when news arrived that a noble Roman knight had arrived in the city. This was St. George, whose gallantry was as wide as the seas. Riding on his white horse, he pronounced that the forces of evil would no longer take the lives of innocent maidens in that place. On meeting the dragon, an epic battle ensued. St. George's spear gleamed in the sunlight, and his armor sparkled like a shooting star as the holy warrior made his way through the darkness and gloom surrounding the monster. The beast uttered a scream that shattered the heavens as St. George smote the dragon, causing it to collapse to the ground and squirm in agony. Once he had rescued the princess, St. George bound the defeated dragon and took it back to the city, no longer as a terrifying monster.
See, it leaves out a bunch of details, but it'd be too time-consuming to watch a whole video on it. And this is like a nice little 8-minute video I got sped up. But he actually takes the garter of the princess. So the way that the legend goes is that he found her tied up on a tree in the wilderness outside the city. And upon riding his horse and coming to the city, he sees this princess tied up to a tree. He asks her what's going on, and she tells him that essentially the city has offered her as a sacrifice to the dragon that's terrifying the village. And that's when he pronounces that, basically this is going to stop. The forces of good are going to stop evil. And when he subdues the dragon, he actually takes her garter, which again, symbol of virginity, wraps it around the head of the demon, of Satan, of the dragon, and then pulls it or guides it all the way back to the city to show the people that he has subdued the beast.
But as a trophy of his bravery, before the astonished and grateful citizens, he offered them not only physical, but also spiritual salvation, preaching the Christian faith. According to legend, many were converted that day, moved by St. George's heroic act and words. Having defeated the dragon, he refused any compensation, revealing his humility and generosity. He donated everything he was given to the poor, underlining his commitment to the Christian values of charity and material detachment. The story of St. George and the dragon became a symbol of courage, faith, and the triumph of good over evil, reverberating through the centuries, drawing inspiration from generations in their pursuit of heroes and miracles. St. George is England's patron saint, and his cross is featured on the nation's flag. During the famous 1425 Battle of Agincourt, where the English army faced the mighty French cavalry, both sides claimed to have seen a vision of St. George during the battle. Obviously, if he did appear, it was to help the English, who, despite being outnumbered, succeeded in humiliating the French. Between 306 and 337 AD, a church dedicated to St. George was built in Lydda. It has been destroyed and rebuilt several times over the centuries. Churches dedicated to saints or martyrs were traditionally raised over their tombs. Although many churches throughout the world claim to hold St. George's relics, the Church of St. George in Lydda is regarded as his final resting place.
Okay, we're done with that video. I do want to share this one. We're not going to watch it, but I've gone through it, and this is basically it's just a collection of some of the examples of saints that dealt with dragons. It's kind of boring because I would just sit here and read it to you guys, but I do want to share it in case any of you guys want to watch it later. It's something I found and prep for the stream. So there's that video. Okay, let's go back to the document because I want to walk through you guys some of this stuff. So, okay, we talked about St. George. Other saints, St. Theodore Tiro, the recruit, early 4th century. His examples are in Greek hagiographies, military cult traditions. A dragon inhabits a spring or well, kills people and livestock. Theodore slays it, often after fasting and prayer. That's in Asia Minor and Cappadocia. Another St. Theodore, often actually presented together, again, paired with Theodore Tiro. Dragon terrorizes the countryside. Saint kills it publicly. He's a military saint, and his dragon is beneath his feet in the iconography of St. Theodore the Stratolates. And then Eastern saints with more localized dragon traditions. You have Saint Marina of Antioch. She is not a dragon slayer, but a dragon conqueror. The narrative is that she is swallowed by a dragon, often identified as Satan, burst forth unharmed by the sign of the cross. And then, of course, she's a saint. Shows dragon imagery used for spiritual combat, not a literal zoology per se. So Saint Romanus of Rouen, 7th century, venerated in the East via shared pre-schism tradition, dwells near Seine, or the Seine, floods and terrorizes the region. Saint subdues the dragon, townspeople kill it. And interesting thing I found is that this was believed to be the origin of gargoyles in Western Europe. It actually has to do with Saint Romanus. I wasn't aware of that. He's more prominent in Western traditions, but pre-schism and known in Byzantine sources. And then these are even more localized urban and civic dragon traditions. The Saint Sylvester of Rome. A dragon dwells beneath Rome. Its breath kills citizens, and Sylvester descends and binds it, meaning dragon linked to imperial pagan power. Defeat symbolizes Christianization of the city. Saint Donatus, dragon poisons a spring, saint kills it, and so forth. And then we have some desert ascetics that encounter some great beast, like Saint Anthony the Great and Athanasius's Life of Saint Anthony. A terrifying beast and serpentine forms, demonic manifestations with physical effects. and sets the paradigm that demons can appear as monstrous creatures, including dragon-like forms. Saint Pachomius, desert tradition includes serpent monsters, dangerous creatures driven away by prayer, not always called dragons, but functionally similar. And then Saint Arsenius the Great encounters with monstrous beings in isolation, emphasis on spiritual authority over hostile entities. So then I thought, I wanted to know, what are the actual historical records of dragons? Like, what are the works that people actually wrote describing what they believe to be real traditions of dragons? And here's what I found. So what counts as a real in historical sources? It's when historians say an ancient or medieval author describes real dragons, we mean that it's not intended as a myth or poetry. It's a literal, at least the author perceives it as literal. Natural history, chronicle, geography, travel account, biography, hagiography, and so on and so forth. So this is crucial because, again, this is my argument between the pre-modern and the modern. Pre-modern authors did not distinguish between mythical versus real as we do today, because they weren't tainted by rationalism. So if something was reported by witnesses or tradition, it was often treated as part of the natural world. So here's what I found going back to the earliest references that I could find of dragons. And we find Herodotus. So this is 5th century BC. In his histories, he describes winged serpents in Arabia. So this is where the argument for literal dragons. I was looking up YouTube videos. I didn't find one YouTube video that referenced any of this stuff. And I found all these videos trying to talk about the literality of dragons. And I'm thinking, well, how come none of the videos actually go and try to find historical sources that reference literal dragons? They just talk about cross-cultural references, symbolic this type of thing. It's like, what? So I found Herodotus. He mentions their bones, their migration routes, local populations who kill them, and then treats them as real fauna, though dangerous and rare. So Herodotus is cautious, but does not frame this as a myth. If you read it, it sounds very literal. Another one I was surprised with was Aristotle. Now, he doesn't specifically reference dragons, but in his history of animals and parts of animals, he mentions very large serpents. And operates with his, this is the Aristotelian sort of biological continuum of serpents, giant serpents, then dragons. And I just throwing this in here for fun. His silence on wings does not negate dragon belief. It reflects empirical caution. Now, this is probably the most important of the historical sources I found, and that's Pliny the Elder. In his Naturalis Historia, this is, he describes the largest of serpents living in India, Ethiopia, and North Africa. He describes them as fighting elephants by coiling around them and suffocating them, being hunted by humans. So could be massive, very large pythons or snakes. But Pliny explicitly classifies dragons as animals, not spirits or gods. And again, that's 1st century AD. Okay. Now, Aelian, 2nd to 3rd century AD, on the nature of animals, describes dragons as intelligent, territorial, capable of affection or vengeance, and mentions dragon guardianship of treasures. And he presents this as natural history, not a legend, not a myth, not a story. And then Near Eastern and Indian Asian sources, the Indian epics, the Mahabharatas, the Puranas, the Ayurvedic text, Nagas, again, the serpent, semi-divine, anthropomorphized deity, is capable of interbreeding, territorial control, warfare with humans, not presented as metaphors. Indian cosmology assumes a plural inhabited world, not closed natural system. So that's another, at least for the Indians, they took that as a literal historical reference, not symbolic. Chinese historical examples, the Shiji, the record of Grand Historian, Han Dynasty natural histories, Tong and Song records. So that's what I was surprised is you find multiple dynasties. Now, we talked about East Asia views these as auspicious, beneficent creatures that symbolize the authority of the emperor. But it is interesting. Now, maybe it's just part of tradition and culture, and it's tied with now the new dynasty is in the ruling power, and so they then present this as historical record. I'm not sure, but dragons are described as real animals, rare but observable. You can actually see them, and they're associated with rainstorms, rivers, occasionally captured or killed. Chinese scholars debated dragon physiology, not dragon existence, which is interesting. I found an example of Marco Polo, 13th century, in his work The Travels, describes giant serpents in Southeast Asia, mentions their size, their hunting methods, local fear and avoidance, explicitly states they are real animals. And again, while he may exaggerate, he believed his account and described it very literally. Medieval European sources, Isidore of Seville, 7th century, in his Etymologia, defines dragons as the largest of serpents living in caves and deserts. And this text was the standard medieval encyclopedia. Dragons were thought as part of the natural world. Very interesting. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles, obviously Beowulf and stuff like that, reports of flying dragons seen in the sky, dragon sightings as ominous events, treated as actual phenomenon and not allegory. The bestiaries of the 12th to 13th century often moralized, but based on earlier natural histories. Dragons described anatomically, wings, poison, habitat, used for education and not for fiction. Gerald of Wales, 12th century, mentions dragons and serpent monsters, treats them as rare but real, not mythologized, not symbolic. Early modern transitional sources, Ulysses Aldrovandi, 16th century, in his Serpentum et Draconum Historia, early zoologist, catalogs dragons, dragon skulls, preserved specimens, attempts actual classification. Now, this is 16th century, guys. Once we get into the 17th century, all this stuff's going to begin to disappear. And he presents this as not medieval fantasy, but proto-science. Conrad Gesner, 16th century, includes dragons, acknowledges uncertainty, does not dismiss their existence outright. And so, in regards to the historical record, yes, there are numerous historical writings across Greece, Rome, India, China, medieval Europe, and early modern science in which authors explicitly describe dragons as real living beings that were seen, killed, feared, and studied. Interesting stuff there. Now, the next section is getting into the origins of fire-breathing dragons. And this is what I was surprised by, is that how contextual it is. So fire-breathing dragons are not universal. The belief emerges relatively late and has concentrated geographically in basically Christian nations. And so you do find early references in some of the Indo-European heroic traditions, but it's mostly within the Christian context. So chronological development, prehistoric, early ancient period, no fire-breathing dragons. They're associated, giant serpents or dragons are associated with water, chaos, floods, fertility, poison. Again, many of the examples I discussed with the opening symbolism, Mesopotamia, Egypt, early China, Vedic India, there is no fire-breathing dragon. Now, by the Bronze Age, transition period, fire becomes associated with divine judgment, smithing and metallurgy, warfare, kingship, but dragons still kill by poison. They crush their prey. They guard treasure. They block rivers. They do not breathe fire. Once we get into the classical antiquity, so 800 BC to 400 AD, fire breathing emerges clearly for the first time. This is a critical turning point in the Greek world. The Greek term drakon initially means large serpent. By the time of the Hellenistic period, dragons began to be associated with burning breath, heat, and lethal vapors. Examples are the chimera of Homer and later Greek sources. It's not universal, but it is becoming established. In the Roman world, Romans intensified this imagery. Pliny the Elder, dragons primarily kill by constriction, but acknowledges burning heat and lethal exaltations. Roman military iconography begins associating dragons with destructive force. By the time of late antiquity and early Christianity, 4th to 7th century AD, Fire breathing becomes theologically stabilized. We see the biblical apocalyptic influence, revelation. The dragon is associated with fire, destruction, judgment, hell. Fire becomes moral, eschatological, and punitive. Dragons now symbolize satanic power, tyranny, persecution. Fire is no longer natural, it is moralized. Early medieval period, 7th to 11th century, fire breathing becomes standard in Northern Europe. So Germanic, Norse, Beowulf's dragon especially breathes fire, burns villages, melts shields and swords. It's one of the earliest fully developed fire-breathing dragon accounts. By the time of the high medieval period, that's 12th to 15th centuries, fire-breathing dragons become dominant in Europe. Chivalric romance, hagiographies, bestiaries, art, and iconography. At this point, a dragon that does not breathe fire is unusual in Western Europe. And then geographic distribution is fire-breathing cross-cultural. Europe and Near East, yes. We find it in that context, as we already mentioned. One of the interesting things I had to dive into is I wasn't finding much explicitly on Russian dragons. And so I dove specifically into what is the Russian tradition of dragons and what do they look like? And this is what I found. Unlike many early dragon traditions, Russian dragons very clearly breathe fire. Fire is destructive, weaponized, associated with devastation of land and people. This aligns Russian dragons more closely with Beowulf's apocalyptic imagery and Christian demonology. The Zimy Gorinich is the archetypal Russian dragon. Sometimes has 3 heads, 6, 9, 12, breathes fire. It flies, dwells in mountains, near rivers, at borders between realms, terrorizes villages, kingdoms, and trade routes. The most famous legend within the Russian context is this Dobrynya Nikitich and his fighting the Zimy. This is the single most famous dragon slaying story in Russia. And just the narrative outline is the dragon terrorizes the land. It kidnaps women, sometimes a princess. It breathes fire, dwells near a river or a cave. And then Dobrynya confronts the dragon, is initially overwhelmed, prays. So we see the human evoking the transcendent power of God, invokes higher help, and then ultimately slays the dragon. So the dragon represents chaos, foreign domination, pagan or demonic power. And the hero restores order, justice, and social stability, mirroring St. George, St. Theodore, and Beowulf. In East Asia, no example of a fire-breathing dragon. Couldn't find any. So it's totally foreign to classical Chinese dragon lore. In India, it's limited. Fire imagery exists, but it's not central to the Nagas. Mesoamerica, no. Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan, they are not fire-breathing deities. They're associated with wind, sky, civilization. Has feathers, signifies the union of opposites. Some people have speculated that the serpent archetype, at least in the Mesoamerican context, is essentially the unification of the most aerial entity, which is some type of like predatory bird, and then the lowest of entities, which is a serpent, and then they smash those two together to create Quetzalcoatl and their Mesoamerican dragon god. And they believed, is it auspicious for whom? He is auspicious for the state. Quetzalcoatl is auspicious for the state, for cosmic order, for ritual stability. But he's actually dangerous for individual human life, victims of sacrifice. Of course, we just talked about all the human sacrifice these civilizations participated in the last stream, and those outside ritual order, rare in Africa, and so on. Now I want to get to something that I have not seen presented, and I'm kind of excited to present this to you guys. But first, just want to remind you guys, we got 14 more super chats on YouTube before I will be choosing a winner to send out this book to today. It'll be a free copy of Return to Babylon, and I hope to get it to you before Christmas because I'm going to get it out in the mail tomorrow. So if we reach 30 super chat goals, I'm going to find a winner who super chatted today and send them the book. But here's what I want to talk to you guys about. How did dragons become discredited? We just talked about all the cross-cultural references. We talked about how they are depicted in cultures that had no contact with each other. We talked about all the saints of the church that have legends associated with dragons. And I just showed you guys the historical examples of people writing. These were educated people writing about dragons as literal entities, not parts of stories or mythologized figurative figures. No, literal. And so my question then was, where did all this stuff go wrong? How did dragons become such a sort of ridiculous topic to actually speak about? And the medieval world view dragons belong to what was lost. Before explaining the shift, we must understand what dragons fit into. So the pre-modern worldview, nature, and this is what I always talk about, the pre-modern versus the modern, right? This is why I think maybe the pre-modern could actually see spiritual entities and realities that us modern people no longer see due to our rationalist presuppositions. But in the pre-modern world, nature was hierarchical, was not uniform. Reality included God, angels and demons, humans, animals, and monsters, border beings, these liminal creatures. Knowledge was testimonial. It was traditional. It was accumulative. And you could say, I could also add here, although I didn't because it's obviously part of the modern period too, is you could say that knowledge was logical, right? Up before the classical period, knowledge was demonstrated through syllogisms, through the laws of logic, but all these attributes were also intact. So rarity did not imply falsehood. The world was not fully mapped. There was an unknowingness. There was a mystery about your daily life, and categories were porous and not rigid like they are today. In this framework, dragons were possible. They were rare, they were local, they were dangerous, and they were marginal to ordinary experience. Nothing about this worldview required dragons to be common or provable by experiment. And this is where we start to get the first breaking of the entire history of dragon lore. It's the 17th century, the rise of mechanical philosophy. So, your guys' people, you guys know Descartes, Galileo Galilei, Gassendi, Hobbes. Core claims is that nature is now viewed as a machine. And this is essential for the transition from the pre-modern to the modern worldview. The pre-modern viewed it as a spiritual reality, as mystical, as unique, interesting, filled with non-rational or super-rational events, miracles, monstrous beings. But once we start getting into the age of science, nature is viewed as a machine, a mechanical operation that can be measured and can be sort of operated upon. Matter becomes passive, quantifiable, governed by laws. Only measurable properties become truly real. The consequences for dragons, they're too rare for experimentation, too exceptional for laws, too anomalous for mechanical causation. Therefore, not denied explicitly, quietly excluded as methodologically irrelevant. Dragons begin to fall outside what counts as legitimate knowledge. And then we get the methodological skepticism of the new epistemology. I've talked to you guys about the Baconian Revolution. It's really hard to underestimate. I was telling Father Peter this when I was over on the Orthodox Ethos, is that this was a revolution in knowledge. What Francis Bacon put forth as the father of empiricism or the father of modern science was he believed what could be measured and averaged was real. And in his epistemological overturning of the scholastic Aristotelian world, he argued that knowledge is utilitarian. Knowledge is empirical, it's repeatable, and it's utilitarian, meaning it has utility. If you know something, you do something, you make something. And the fact that you can make something demonstrates your knowledge, right? It's the empirical repeatability concept, then put upon knowledge itself. Can you repeatably present that you know how to do something, therefore you make something do? This is what totally totally transformed European understandings of what knowledge was and what it did. And so he was interested in collections of systematical knowledge, right? We need to then measure everything. He has a famous quote talking about how we need to rape the secrets out of nature. And so ancient testimony becomes suspect. Wonders are then understood as just illusions of some sort, or superstitions, just folk superstitions of people. They're not as erudite. They're not as sophisticated and educated as the echelon of European society. And what are the consequences? Pliny and medieval encyclopedists lose all authority during this period. Eyewitness tradition collapses. Direct, contemporary, reproducible knowledge is the only thing that is important. And therefore, dragons are not refuted. They are downgraded to just rumor, mythological rumor. And so the new scientific institutions, the Royal Society, 1616, Nullus in verba, take no one's word for it, becomes the motto of modern science. It has an emphasis on experiments, instruments, controlled observation. The effect: dragons cannot be summoned, they cannot be dissected, and they cannot be repeatedly observed. Therefore, they fail institutional criteria for knowledge. Dragons are not false, they are inadmissible. In the 18th century, the philosophical collapse of monsters, Enlightenment rational, Voltaire, Hume, core assumptions: reason alone judges reality. Nature is uniform, predictable, and law-governed. Exceptions imply error, not mystery. David Hume: testimony must always yield to probability. Miracles and monsters violate uniform experience. Therefore, reports of dragons are irrational to believe. The birth of modern taxonomy. Carl Linnaeus in the 18th century introduces fixed species, binomial classification. Reality must be ordered and exhaustively classifiable. Problem for dragons is there's no specimen, no stable species traits, no clear reproductive population. Dragons cannot be placed, therefore cannot exist within modern taxonomy. The elimination of the entire monster category, which is where we still get the Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, right? All these kind of strange, cryptids that are so popular among conspiracy theorists. That entire category gets eliminated. And so medieval thought allowed monsters as boundary beings, rare exceptions, signs of divine judgment, and natural irregularity. Enlightenment thought rejected anything between natural and supernatural, normal and abnormal. Monsters become errors, malformations, and myths. And then the theological shifts that accelerated this disbelief is obviously Protestant rationalism, rejection of hagiography, rejections of the lives of the saints, and really a rejection of miracle tradition. That's what I would argue. I mean, you ask the average Protestant, they'd probably say some of them would say they still believe in miracles, but they're suspicious of medieval sources in Catholic cosmology and Orthodox cosmology. They're just not as familiar with it. And so dragon slaying saints are recast as total allegory or dismissed as superstition. Dragons lose religious credibility first in Protestant regions. And then deism in the closed universe, deist assumptions: God creates the world and withdraws. No ongoing divine action, no miracles, no monsters. The universe becomes closed, self-sufficient, and predictable, therefore making dragons metaphysically impossible. And then the final blow, I argue, is the mapping of the world, 17th to 18th century, global exploration, cartography, colonial administration, natural surveys. Unknown lands shrink rapidly. Since dragons were always somewhere remote, when everywhere becomes mapped, there is nowhere left for them to hide. So again, this document is like stuff that we talk about over at the Logos Academy. So if you want access to stuff like these study guides, go sign up. It's all in a huge playlist over there for anybody who wants access to these so they can look over them. Now I want to move into dinosaurs, right? Because why is it that if you believe in dragons, you're mocked and humiliated as some backward Neanderthal? But we're told that we're supposed to believe in dinosaurs. And so this is my attempt to actually provide a sort of internal critique of dinosaurs themselves. And so this is my first statement here. Are dragons and dinosaurs in the same category? Because we just talked about all this stuff and how the development of the modern world basically eliminates dragons, right? Well, why is it that we believe in dinosaurs so much? I argue the category dinosaurs, as currently understood, non-avian reptiles living 65 to 230 million years ago, is an interpretive construct built on fragmentary fossil evidence, heavy inference, artistic reconstruction, and assumptions about deep time that are not as empirically secure as often claimed. Many fossils attributed to dinosaurs may be misclassified, composite, exaggerated, or reinterpretable within alternative frameworks. So, argument one, fossils are fragmentary and reconstructions are speculative. So, this is more of a philosophical critique of dinosaurs. The core claim: most dinosaur species are named from partial bones, teeth, vertebrae, or various fragments that they've discovered. Full skeletal mounts in museums are heavily reconstructed, contain casts, not originals, often rely on artistic interpolation. Therefore, if a species is defined from a few bones and reconstructed by analogy to modern animals, then the final dinosaur image reflects theory-laden reconstruction, not direct observation, and therefore are not actually scientifically verifiable. Supporting points critics emphasize, different paleontologists have produced radically different reconstructions of the exact same fossils. Some new species later turn out to be juvenile forms, sexual dimorphisms, pathological specimens. Conclusion: what we call dinosaurs may be a taxonomic inflation of fragmentary data interpreted through evolutionary assumptions. That's just a fancy way to say dinosaurs and the entire legend and story surrounding dinosaurs is a total interpretation based on people today looking at animals that exist and saying, well, based on this, femur bone, which could be from anything. That's one of the things I'm going to get into is the fact that many of these bones aren't even two dinosaurs because it violates the definition of being 25 to 230 or 300 million years old. And so argument two, and this is, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I just recently watched this guy on there's like a video, it was going on X or something. Maybe it was on Instagram. And some like paleontologist talks about, oh, we just discovered a new dinosaur. And he admits, like, we just found these few fossils, right? And then he has this whole video presentation on what types of food it ate, how big, the range of how big and small they were, the behavior patterns between male and females, it's like, how did you get any of that stuff from a few broken pieces of bone? That makes zero sense. But the circular reasoning in dating fossils, this is a philosophical critique. So I'm not dealing with actual fossils that have been discovered. I'm doing more of a philosophical critique, but the core claim is fossils are dated by rock layers, right? Sediment layers. Rock layers are dated by the fossils. Therefore, index fossils are used to create data strata. The same strata then is used to date fossils. This creates a closed interpretive loop. You see, the fossils are used to tell you how old the ground layers are, but then the amount of ground layers they use to tell you how old the fossil is. So it creates this loop, this feedback loop on presuppositions. How the hell do you know how old the fossil is when you had to construct the dating of the fossil to describe the layers of sediment, and then through the layers of sediment, then you can classify how old the fossil is? That doesn't make sense. Critics argue radiometric dating depends on assumptions about initial conditions, assumes constant decay rates, cannot be directly verified for deep time. Fossils are rarely dated directly. Dates are often assigned to stratigraphic context, not measurement. Conclusion: dinosaur fossils are dated within a self-referential system, not by independent confirmation. Interesting. Argument number 3, questioning dinosaur-bird transition. The core claim is that birds are living dinosaurs, and this rests on morphological similarity and phylogenetic interpretation. Critics argue that this is interpretive and not demonstrative. Key points: many feathered dinosaurs may be birds misclassified as dinosaurs. Preservation artifacts, collagen fibers mistaken as feathers, soft tissue claims. Then this is a big one. There are so many examples of dinosaur fossils and bones being discovered, and they still have blood vessels and proteins in them. which is impossible based on the timeline that we're told that dinosaurs existed. So that challenges deep time assumptions, no direct observation, and reptile to bird transformation, transitional reproductive systems. It assumes Darwinian evolution. It assumes Darwinian macroevolution. It then, by that nature, it forces you into the modernist paradigm, despite the empirical data not actually substantiating it. It's almost like a modern myth. Now, I'm not even here to say dinosaurs didn't exist. I'm just bringing up that this is a problem within their own worldview, that this is just my internal critique at a philosophical level. And this is where I follow up with the soft tissue and biomolecules and fossils. This is one of the most rhetorically powerful arguments used by skeptics. The core claim is soft tissues, collagen, blood vessel structures have been reported in dinosaur fossils. Protein should not survive tens of millions of years under unknown chemical laws. Therefore, if organic molecules decay rapidly and dinosaur and fossils contain such molecules, then either decay rates are wrong or the fossils are much, much younger than they claim they are. Iron preservation hypothesis, experimental replication is limited, and the preservation window is far shorter than claimed fossil ages. Conclusion: soft tissue evidence is in tension with deep time dinosaur chronology. So that's where I'm not even saying dinosaurs don't exist or dragons didn't exist. I'm saying that the evidence for these are not very compelling. The evidence for dinosaurs are not very compelling. And in a sense, if we're only using empiricism, as I showed you the intellectual trajectory that essentially poo-poos and shoo-aways dragons, you very much could use the same epistemological framework of modern day empiricism and materialism to kind of shoo away some of the dinosaur stuff, or at least demonstrate it's not as logically plausible as they want you to believe it is. Argument 5, dinosaur fossils may represent known animals or misidentified megafauna. And this has been claimed that they use like whale bones and bones that they find near the ocean from sea creatures. And then they reappropriate these and say, well, this is actually the the thigh bone of a T-Rex or a Velociraptor. Dinosaur may be an umbrella category masking large reptiles, could be dragons, extinct mammals, marine reptiles, or giant birds. Key points: some fossils originally classified as dinosaurs were later reassigned, and historical zoology shows frequent misclassification. Critics argue size inflation, reconstruction bias, and cultural expectation of monsters. Dinosaurs may be a conceptual category error, not a biological one. And number 6, historical absence of dinosaur discovery until the 19th century, which is really interesting, right? We have all these stories about dragons across the entire globe from civilizations that never met. And yet the first time we even hear about dinosaurs is like 1841. So no unambiguous dinosaur fossils were identified until the early 1800s, despite mining, quarrying, ancient civilizations. Critics argue, if dinosaurs were real and abundant, why is there no ancient descriptions? Why no classical taxonomy? Therefore, fossils were often ignored, misidentified, or mythologized about, but critics maintain the silence is still suspicious, right? Why is it only in the modern period that we hear about dinosaurs? And my last argument, and this is more of a cultural argument, and that's why I say it's probably the weakest of my arguments epistemologically, but it's something that people talk about and it should be addressed, is the cultural and institutional momentum of dinosaur science. Again, you could argue that Darwinian evolution is tied to it, the sort of redating the earth to do away with traditional religious cosmologies is part and parcel of it. But the core claim is that dinosaur theory is institutionally entrenched, financially supported, and resistant to any sort of paradigm change. Therefore, once a framework becomes dominant, dissent is filtered out, right? You are actually considered as a weirdo if you say dinosaurs don't exist. Think about that. We live in a time now, if you don't believe in dinosaurs, you're the weirdo. Alternative interpretations struggle for funding, And skeptics argue the narrative persists partially by a sort of cultural inertia, cultural momentum in regards to this whole dinosaur fiasco. Now, as I said, this is the weakest argument epistemologically, but still part of me steel manning the dinosaur case. So that's a little bit of my overview on how did dragons disappear and how are dragons and dinosaurs not in the same conceptual category given the empirical inverifiability of both. It's a question that needs to be answered. So with all that, now I want to pose to you guys a poll. I'm legitimately curious what you guys have to say, and I'll catch up on all the super chats here in just a second. But I want to start a poll. Dragons, what are they? Okay, we're going to go with literal, real, and historical. We're going to go with mythologized, and figurative. Archetypal, and then spiritual entities we no longer see. Okay, there we go. All right. I'm curious what you guys have to say. So, dragons, what are they? Literal, real, and historical? Mythologized and figurative? Archetypal and metaphysically true? Or real spiritual entities? I'll say that I probably lean towards the real spiritual entities portion. That's my own little precept, but I really don't know. I am no expert on debunking dinosaurs. I'm no expert on proving dragons or disproving dragons. Obviously, I'm very critical of the modernist worldview. So I'm curious what you guys have to say. All right, we reached the 30 super chat goal. Let me catch up here with some of these guys. Thank you all so much. Dano throws in $2. Orthodox cross. Thank you very much, Dano. Okay. I already read that one. And Dan Vicious said, thanks for answering, DPH. Well, thank you, brother, for the support. Really appreciate it. Vigo throws in 2, no comment. And Fernando throws in 5, says, a little early to say, but Christ is born, glorify him. Amen, brother. Absolutely. You can still say Merry Christmas, right? I've been telling everybody Blessed Nativity. Octavian throws in 2, says, look up Dacian Draco, wolf head and serpent tail. Dacian Draco. All right. Let's look this up. So he says Dacian Draco. Oh, gosh. Okay. Dacian. Oh, okay. Interesting. Use a military standard used by troops in ancient Dacian people, which can be seen in the hands of soldiers. The wind instrument has the form of a dragon with an open wolf-like jaws containing several metal tongues. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you, Octavian, for that. Really appreciate it. Bill Hicks throws in 2, says, let's hit that goal. Thank you very much, Bill Hicks. Octavian throws in another $2. Thank you so much, brother. Along with Vigo. And X Lockstep throws in 5. Bill Hicks says, are dinosaur bones actually from dragons? Well, some people have said that, but as I mentioned earlier, if dragons did exist, it would make sense why they don't really have a historical fossil record, because their bones would be so light for them to fly, right? I'm actually going to play you a video of a guy making that argument. So, and to me, it's logical. I mean, because that's one of the problems with the fossil record of like apex birds. Even though they're massive apex predators, their bones are hollow and they're so light that they decompose and break much easier. That would make sense then if dragons were real, their bones would be hard to find. Yeah, the dude on Rogan. Yeah, I'm going to play that, K-Ram. I'm actually going to play that section here in just a few. Bill Hicks throws in 5, says, I'm happy you brought up cryptids. If dragons are cryptids, liminal beings, would they still have physical remains? Well, that's my point, Bill Hicks, in that I believe they're actually spiritual entities. I believe that it's very possible, just like with my example of the African tribe that doesn't have a word for the color blue and therefore cannot see the color blue. It's the idea that our sort of linguistic repertoire actually maps reality, right? In that we actually experience the world through the linguistic maps that we have. And if that's the case, the same would be true for our presuppositions. And I argue that maybe pre-modern people actually saw the spiritual world more visibly and more literally than we can today. And therefore, that's why once we moved into the modern period, we get dinosaurs, but there's no more existence of dragons. So I don't know, possible. Octavian said, would you play the Bones vid? I don't know what the Bones vid is. You have to tell me what the Bones vid is. I have no idea what that is. Kristen, Slowboy Whiteboard throws in 5, says, half an hour on the goal, guys. Come on, let's go. Thank you so much, Kristen. Merry Christmas. Blessed nativity to you and your family. Thank you for all you and Crispy do in the chat as mods. Really, really appreciate you guys. Legitimately. Mr. Fista throws in another 10, says, based on the bones, we know that dinosaurs woke up around 8:30 a.m. sharp, weighed 200 tons, and could see 17 miles. Macro evolutionary theory is so goofy. It legitimately is. Like, it's crazy how it's crazy how they extrapolate to such a degree, and they talk about like the sleep cycles and the mating habits and all the different nutritional sources various dinosaurs used, and which tree canopy. Well, these trees don't exist anymore, but we have evidence of a different type of tree, and its neck is perfectly for eating the. Come on. Dinosaurs have to be one of the greatest myths of our modern day. At least for me, it's I'm not convinced of the empirical evidence of them. Octavian throws another $2. Thank you so much, Octavian. And Vigo throws another 2. Thank you so much. Vigo throws in 5, says, dinosaur, a universal category according to people who deny universals are real. Yeah, great point. Great point, Vigo. That's great rhetoric. Byzantine Soldier throws in 349. I'm getting baptized on January 4th. Slava Bogu. Glory to God, man. Welcome to the church. Welcome home. That's excellent, excellent news, man. I'm really, really happy to hear that. Paul throws in 5, says the bombardier beetle produces explosives out of its butt, so maybe not so far off. Also, I don't know, you were a fellow Hoosier. Yes, I am a fellow Hoosier. And yes, I was aware of the bombardier beetle. I actually saw that because I was looking up, is there any evidence of other, fire breathing or anything like that? But it is what it is. Thank you very much, Paul, though. God bless you, man. And Thomas throws in 10, says, considering the thumbnail on today's topic, do you have an opinion on, I believe that's Dungeons and Dragons? I know the game has multiple reputations, but me and my friends at our parish play it when we have a chance. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, so I can't really make a claim on that. I don't even know how it works. I know that it's a kind of a board game or a card game of some sort, and then there are video games. But I don't know much about Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played it, never looked into it, not really aware of anything about it. So God bless you, Thomas, and all the parishioners at your church. You know, if that's what you guys do, if that's what you guys do, God bless you guys. All right. Let me see if anybody's sent anything in over on the Dono chat before we go to the next section. Justin Henley throws in 10, says, I already have your book, so I defy your super chatters goals. God bless and Merry Christmas. Well, thank you very much, brother, for getting the book. I really appreciate that. And thanks for all the support over the years. And we'll check Streamlabs real quick. All right, we're up to speed now. So I got to figure out, let's see what the poll says real quick. So it looks like the leading vote here is that they are literal, real, and historical. And then the second is that they're real spiritual entities, which is kind of I would say I'm probably on a number 4, real spiritual entities. But keep voting. I'm curious what you guys come up with. Okay. So going back to here, I want to show you guys a couple different things. This is... Oh, no, I had it timestamped. Now it's going to start from the beginning. Ah, crap.
Strange question.
So this guy is very dismissive of dinosaurs. Let me see. Of dragons. There's a section.
Is it basically a dramatization of of snakes and lizards and stuff like this?
And just general exaggeration and welding stuff together. I mean, that's one thing you could potentially argue is that, we find tyrannosaurs in North America and in East Asia. In fact, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the End Cretaceous, which is often very common because it's a relatively recent.
I just thought this was funny because this guy's like a dinosaur expert, and I'm blocked by Lex Friedman. I don't ever even engage with this guy, and he blocked me on X. Some people say he has like a bot or something, and if you say anything negative of him, he will block you. I don't exactly am sure, but I'm not impressed by, Lex Friedman's presented as this incredibly erudite, sophisticated, tech intellectual, almost like a genius of some sort, a Jewish genius. And I have never found that to be the case. This English guy is like a dinosaur expert. And the first section was him basically, it was real quick, but he was mocking the idea that dragons ever existed or the fact that people believe in dragons. But then the irony is, to me, he talks about dinosaurs as if it's just like a fact of reality.
In the grand scheme of things in the history of the world, the fauna of East Asia, China, Mongolia, Eastern Russia is very similar to what you get in Canada and the USA and down in Mexico. And so you find the same rough stuff. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but you get ceratopsians, you get tyrannosaurs, you get the big-edged pterosaurs, you get ankylosaurs, the armored ones, this, that, and the other. So if these were influencing all those different cultures, why don't Chinese dragons look like Mexican dragons or equivalent of thunderbirds or whatever? Well,
if humans exist, how come they have different clothes in different cultures? What? Because there's an artistic difference between cultures. Bill Hicks says, Lex Friedman sucks. He's so freaking boring. His videos were forced into the algorithm. My mom had him keep popping up and he was like, who the F is this guy? Yeah, no, legitimately. I can't stand Lex Friedman. I do not get the appeal. And his channel's huge. It's like 1.5 million. He didn't get tons of views on this one, but he gets like the biggest people on his podcast. I do not get the appeal of Lex Friedman. But this guy's argument is that dragons aren't real because there's different depictions in different cultures. Okay, they all look pretty similar though. Strange how that works.
Well, because it probably wasn't influencing them. If they were all seeing the same skeletons, they probably all produced the same kind of mythical.
And then assumes that the ancient people were paleontologists and archaeologists. Like, if they're looking at, what if they weren't looking at skeletons? What if they are actually seeing something flying in the air that was terrorizing people and eating humans? Is that possible?
animals. You
Well,
use different ones.
You have to understand, paleontology is not perfect, so they were just misinterpreting.
Misinterpreted, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dragons aside, I'm sure, like we said, with the weirdness, there would be creatures that would be remarkable, right? You look at it, you might as well be seeing a dragon. It could be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's creatures alive in the sea today.
Yeah, I mean, if you tried to stop a colossal squid, I think you'd have.
Yeah.
You know, or even just dugongs and manatees. I mean, they're really quite strange.
And if you allow yourself to marvel at the small things on Earth, like I was in the Amazon jungle.
All right. Anyways, it's really just the point was just the British guy, and he just yammers on. Well, here's the video that I wanted to show you about. This is from Joe Rogan. This is the guy who is arguing that he's like another dinosaur guy, but if dragons existed, this was his argument.
There's a group of people that say that dragons were real. So around the same time period in, China, South America, Africa, all these different Rome, all these places, images depicted people fighting dragons, right? And every dragon was slightly different, but it was all a giant scaly animal that could fly. So when you break that down, you think about the fact that large birds had a hard time being fossilized because their bones are so porous, right? So because they have like hollowish bones, they break down very easily and they don't fossilize. Basically, they're saying the evidence is the reason there's no fossils of dragons is because they had bird bones and they were actually very delicate animals. A small population of these giant flying lizards existed and basically encompassed all these different countries where they all depicted fighting dragons in their own way, and they were all killed off by knights or whatever it is, and then didn't fossilize. That's why all these human populations around the world have depictions of them, because they did actually exist.
So there's a logical possibility for their existence right there. Now here, I just had to do it for my own interest and put in dragons over on TikTok. I just wanted to see what would come up. And so I want to show you a few of these videos, and then some of the, the skepticism of dinosaurs.
This is a giant doorway in Kazakhstan. At least that's what I thought when I first looked at it. But if you look at this closely, this looks like someone's hand.
And this is what I meant by so many of these people that are like trying to prove dragons. And I'm not even disproving that they exist, because if the church has saints that make literal claims about them, I'm enticed to believe it. I mean, I believe in a mystical reality. However, this guy's looking at a mountain and looking at this, it is arguing that this is the hand of a dragon, and that this whole mountain is basically the skeletal remains of a dragon. It's like, come on, bro. Like, are these just misinformation agents? Because you make anybody who actually has an interest in the dragons look totally dumb.
Grabbing or holding on to something. This kind of looks like a petrified dragon hand. Because when I first made this video, people were saying, oh, wait, no, that's a dragon. That's a dragon. It looks like it could be a doorway, but look at the webbing of the thumb.
Come on, bro. That's rock. That is not webbing of a thumb. And if it was webbing, it would have already decomposed. What are you talking about, bro?
Right there. And then the index finger right here. The middle finger here. This is a hand. Dragons used to be widely accepted and known creatures, not mythical. This is a 1946 dictionary definition of dragon.
Just so you guys know what's going on TikTok, this has like 11,000 likes. This is a massively popular video.
It says, now rare, a huge serpent, a fabulous animal, generally a monstrous winged scaly serpent, lizard, or saurian. A fierce or very strict person, especially a woman. That's a little crazy. But now rare, which means they used to be all over the place. Small arboreal lizards of the East Indies and Southern Asia. Dragons were all over India. Hold on. Apollonius of Tyana, a Greek philosopher, documented the
Apollonius of Tyana was actually, he was like there's a skeptical, critical argument among scholars who argue that he's actually the basis of who Jesus Christ was. And I actually did a research paper during my master's degree. This was before I actually became Christian, looking and reading the Apollonius of Tyana, the whole legends of his life and stuff. And there's like a couple examples of miracles. Again, him like performing some type of ritual, and like drawing a circle on the ground. He was like a circle drawer. And it's it's definitely not Christ, but I'm curious where he's going to go with this.
Dragons that he saw when he was traveling through India. Dragons of enormous size and variety infest northern India, concluded Apollonius of Tyana, who traveled through the southern foothills of the Himalayas in the 1st century. The countryside is full of them, and no mountain ridge was without one. Dragons seem to be real. The Bible mentions dragons over 30 times. Check it out, Isaiah 27:1. Leviathan, the piercing serpent. Even Leviathan, that crooked serpent.
See, and as we said, Leviathan is a sea creature. And the early mythology of dragons was that they were sea creatures. It isn't until the church is fully established by the 4th century that we start getting regular descriptions of dragons as flying, fire-breathing entities. Although there's evidence of them flying before that in regards to the fire specifically. So, I don't know where he's going, but just to be more specific, we looked at the Hebrew word for Leviathan, and certainly it is a sort of serpentine monster, but it's not exactly the same thing that he's referring to as dragon. And that's not even to disprove dragons. I'm actually open to the literal historical reality of dragons. I'm open to a lot of stuff as an Orthodox Christian who's a non-modernist. Anything modernity says, I'm skeptical of until proven otherwise. But this dude has like no nuance in his conspiracies. I got more from this guy.
And he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Thou breaketh the heads of the dragons in the waters. All kinds of verses. Lords are dragons. Dragon. But a lot of those legend stories are rooted in truth. And even the Chinese culture incorporate dragons in their calendar and in their history. Dragons seem to be all over the place. I don't think it's fake. I think dragons are real, and the mainstream doesn't want us to think that for various reasons. Who knows why? Dinosaurs are fake, but it looks like dragons are real. And if that is not a hand, I don't know what is. There's a lot of history.
Here's another guy who's adamant.
Dragons are real, and they've been trying.
See, I just don't get why we don't get better defenders of stuff like this. Like, if somebody believes dragons are real, where's the guys that really have the evidence? This thing has 160,500 likes. This TikTok, 160,000 likes. That's not views. That's likes.
Tell us this whole time, y'all motherfuckers gonna love this one. At least that's what some people claim, and we may have even found actual proof in 2024. Even though in 1841 we already technically confirmed their existence, we just called them dinosaurs. As always, just a theory, but anyone with more than half a brain cell knows that. Common history tells us the most recent dinosaurs that roamed the earth went extinct around 65 million years ago. So why do we see them in countless ancient drawings and artifacts just a couple thousand years old? Way after they allegedly went extinct, but also before we started discovering their bones. We didn't even officially know what dinosaurs were until 1824, and they weren't even named dinosaurs until 1841. Before then, we had a different name for them: dragons. Nearly every culture of our past had their own version of a scaly, fire-breathing, flying lizard that brave warrior.
Not fire-breathing, as we just talked about. So he kind of oversteps the actual articulation and historical evidence there. But fair enough. They're all cross-cultural, and there seem to be multiple people like Pliny the Elder that argued in the historical literality of these.
Would face to protect their land. And we see these dino dragons in numerous Neolithic cave drawings around the world, painted into rock walls thousands of years old, well before we ever even knew they were a thing. Petroglyphs in Havasupai Canyon, Arizona, Natural Bridges, Utah, and even up around Lake Superior in Canada. And this is just the tip. I think you know where we're going. Over to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, we see more carvings of what looks like a stegosaurus. Carlisle Cathedral in England has etchings of animals unlike we've ever seen. Down in Australia, the Aborigines had this painting of a creature they hunted, and it don't look like anything I know. The Yuan Diao dragon figure from the Shang dynasty about 2000 BC, which looks almost exactly like a T-Rex. And I mean, ancient China is just filled to the brim with bronze statues thousands of years old that resemble our extinct lizard pals. Here's the Mesopotamian Jasper cylinder.
That's a great point. Sower Cookie says, to be frank, scientists think every animal in those cave paintings existed except the dragon-looking one. Fair enough. That's a great point, because they absolutely take cave paintings as literal descriptions of historical entities except dragons, which again, if dragons are real, it validates a biblical Christian worldview. It validates a much more traditionalist pre-modern worldview. Aboriginosaurus. Organized insanity. But legitimately, Sour Cookie's right. Like the claims scientists make based on cave paintings, why don't they make those same claims based on dragons? There's just as much evidence for them. Great point.
From the Uruk period, about 3500 BC, and if that ain't a long neck, then I don't know what to tell you. Mind you, these are all several hundred, if not thousands of years old, and they're all over the ancient world. Like, are those humans riding dinosaurs in a 16th century painting? And who can forget about the Acambaro figurines, a collection of 30,000 minifigures uncovered in Mexico of dinosaurs and humans riding them. Initial dating analyses estimated them to be about 4,500 years old, but follow-up stated they were made in the 1930s. So they can quickly dismissed them as a hoax, debunked and move on, but evidence kept on coming. The Ica stones, a collection of more than 15,000 engraved stones which depict, what's that look like to you? Discovered in Peru, said to be over 1,000 years old, and again later claimed a hoax by the one who found them, some say out of force to avoid imprisonment. Is it possible that humans had contact, or at the very least knowledge of dinosaurs in ancient times? Absolutely not, unless they're not as old as we think they are. In 2003, a researcher, Dr. Mary Schweitzer, found a T-Rex femur that was so big they had to snap it in half for transport, something they usually don't do. They do that, take it back to the lab, and inside the bone they find preserved red blood cells. They couldn't believe it. Red blood cells don't last very long, and soft tissue was thought to deteriorate even under the best of conditions within 1 million years. Never mind over 68 million years, even inside of a bone. They concluded it must be a new preservation method they were previously unaware of, which could be the case. Calm the f down. But since then, they started cracking open more dinosaur bones, finding veins and even soft organic tissue that was stretchy and had an odor, which led some to believe that it could be possible that maybe some dinosaurs were around much more recently than we thought. Before we knew what dinosaurs were, there was a different type of giant reptile that was found in many oral traditions and stories: dragons. Around the same time period in China, South America, Africa, Rome, Aboriginal Australia, we get legends and images of humans fighting off giant scaly winged creatures that flew and breathed fire. All the way up until medieval times, tales of dragons all around the world. So did everyone just coincidentally come up with the exact same mythical creature, or did they actually see it? And the ancient Chinese especially had a huge obsession with dragons as well. Just have a look at the Chinese zodiac. Have you ever thought, why does it have 11 real animals and then they randomly decided to throw in just one mythical creature, the dragon? Having 12 real animals makes more sense to me. Turns out they might have been onto something, because we may have just found the fossil of one in the heart of China. So the potential reason dragon bones might be so rare is because dragons can fly, just like birds. Birds have extremely light, low-density bones that don't fossilize very easily, and it's very likely that dragons would have had the same. Until recently, this was announced. Discovered fossilized remains of a 5-meter-long reptile in southern China. Officially called Dinocephalosaurus orientalis, it has been dubbed the Chinese dragon fossil, as unlike any dinosaur fossil we've ever found. Although it's said to be 240 million years old, that's also exactly what they said about the dinosaurs. Did humans coexist with dinosaurs, and were dragons just a rare species of dinosaur that we hunted into extinction for the safety of our future? Dragons.
So I thought it was interesting, and that is basically what most conspiracy theorists argue regarding the validity. In that, the reason why I didn't bring up the Chinese, dragon fossil is they do argue that it's essentially a dinosaur, but it is a huge problem that they have to deal with regarding the fact that these things, exist with blood vessels and protein and stuff like that, which. And I'm even open. I'm curious what you guys think. I'm open to the idea that we lived with dinosaurs. I don't even have a hard line. I'm curious what you guys think. How many of you guys think that dinosaurs existed? Can I get hands in the chat? Like Y's for yes and N's for no. How many of you guys believe in dinosaurs? Because I would be open to the possibility that we coexisted with them. I just think modern paleontology, and that's where I highlighted my internal critiques, it's questionable. Looks like most of you guys Christian says, yeah. Christian Zionism is Judaism says no. Sower Cookie says, I think there's legit dino stuff. Derek's Fly Fishing says, of course we coexist with dinosaurs. I eat their nuggets. Fair enough. Fair enough. Solo Manevsky says, have no clue. Oh, Crispy's on he's a hater. He says no. Drew says no. Octavian says yes, but not the way it's presented. Akathis, shout out to you, brother. I think some dinosaurs existed, but there's a lot of fraudulent ones. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Now, here's a couple that I was going to show you guys on. Are dinosaurs a hoax? Now, it seems like our audience is kind of split. Some say no, some say yes. I'm going to play a couple of these videos and see what you guys think.
What if I told you it have never existed at all? Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but stay with me. The word dinosaur wasn't even created until 1842. And guess what? That's also around the same time the first dinosaur bones just happened to be discovered. Before that, nothing. No talk of giant lizards, no museum bones, no ancient records calling them by name. And here's the part that gets real weird. We've never found a full dinosaur skeleton, ever. Just random bones, scattered, broken, and dug up by people who get paid to find them. Then, museums take those pieces and build giant skeletons based on guesses. They even use plaster and fake bones to fill in the gaps. So ask yourself, what if the idea of dinosaurs was created to support something else, to help push the theory of evolution, to make us feel small and unimportant in a long, random universe? And what about all those ancient stories of dragons, giant creatures with wings and scales? Why were those erased and replaced with scientific versions called dinosaurs? You didn't see the fossils. You saw cartoons, museums, Hollywood. That's not proof. That's a program. Maybe dinosaurs were never real. Maybe they were just the cover story.
This is just a theory.
And I'm open to that one as well. Here's
And you got to realize they've only been finding dinosaurs for 200 years. 200 years ago, they didn't know what
That's when the Jews started burying those bones.
Well, there was a bunch of dudes who had fake dinosaur
You're
bones.
trying to trick us.
Don't attack us. It's been nice weather today.
You know, there was a bunch of dudes who put like other bones and claimed they were dinosaur bones. There's a bunch of frauds.
Well, those were the
dinosaur
actual Jewish dudes. I heard there's money in bones.
Jamie, when did they discover dinosaurs?
All right, you look like a pterodactyl.
Imagine discovering dinosaurs. Going, oh, is this still around?
I think most of them
You
at
know-
the White House. Pelosi, get out.
She
You
just
need to
filed
stop.
for re-election.
Ah, she's like 79.
She's 84.
84 with those
She
tits.
just fired for
Pretty
Nice.
huge.
Here it
Cans.
is. And you got to realize they've
I just wanted to play the joke on the, the Jews creating dinosaur bones. That's hilarious.
Did you know, guys, that dinosaurs never existed? I know this might be triggering for a lot of people out there because we've been indoctrinated since school and with films to believe that these big monsters roamed the earth at some point. But there's been no ancient culture that has ever found dinosaur bones or dinosaur skeletons. The only people to have found dinosaur bones are the people that were actually invested in pushing the theory of dinosaurs and the theory of evolution, Freemasons and people like that. When you go to museums, you're not seeing dinosaur bones or dinosaur skeletons. You're seeing a combination of paper mache, whale bones, animal bones, and even one of the most famous skeletons in one of the museums in America, it's been exposed that the head of the dinosaur is actually an iguana's head. You can't see the originals. They're in a vault somewhere. So they say that they need to be protected. No one can ever see them. It's all fake. It's all lies to keep you away from the idea of a creator. Did you know, guys?
So that's another video. You can go on TikTok and find so many videos questioning the existence of dinosaurs and all types of stuff.
Dinosaurs never existed. This is the flat Earth guy.
The guy that does 200 proofs the Earth is flat.
Or in other words, the existence of dinosaurs was first.
And this is with this like liberal paleontology. The guy has like a bright yellow beard. I found a 30-minute clip of him on Joe Rogan, like basically just absolutely mocking people who don't believe dinosaurs existed or believe in dragons.
Speculatively hypothesized by a United Museum head, coincidentally in the mid-19th century during the heyday of evolutionism, before a single dinosaur fossil had ever been found.
Dinosaurs, we discovered marine reptiles and the first dinosaurs about a century before that. So that right there, Eric, you're fucking wrong.
Whoops.
It's like, don't bring your flat earth bullshit into my profession.
Dinosaurs
Guy's a little offended at somebody questioned dinosaurs.
What if I told you dinosaurs might have never existed at all? Yeah, I know. It sounds crazy, but stay with.
Okay, this is just somebody using Joe Rogan.
With me.
See, you can use Joe Rogan stuff if it's on TikTok, but if you pull up his videos, they get flagged immediately. But anyways, guys, I got to find a winner for the book tonight. So we reached the 30 super chats. Smash that like for everyone who's still here. Really appreciate you guys. We got to figure out who wins the book tonight. So what do you guys recommend I do? Should I just pull a question, should I just like pick a number between 1 and 100 and tell people, and if you super chatted, you can post in the chat the number and who's ever the closest wins. You think that's the fairest thing to do? Just pick a number. Dinosaur denier. I could go both ways. I mean, I'm skeptical of the whole thing, but I'm open. I really don't have a hard line on this. So let's see. Okay, that works. All right, here we go. I'm going to think of a number between 1 and 100. And if you super chatted, you post the number that you think in the chat. And if you super chat on Dono Chat or Streamlabs, I'll include you. So if you guys vote. So, all right. I got my number. From 1 to 100. This 1 to 100, guys. First, the closest one to get to my number will win my book. And then you'll have to email me first one is 62. Octavian's 47. Thomas 31. Paul 51. Dano 86. Hey, American Nacho's in the chat. 67. Shout out to you, American Nacho. Dude, I got to send your hard drive. Organized Insanity throws 14 out. Kyle Comp 67. If you say 43, you got a super chat $43. That is fair. That is fair. Let's see. Okay, is that all the guesses from everybody who super chatted? Let me make sure I can make sure that the person closest I don't see the person who's closest. I don't see that they super chatted. So let me go to the next one. Okay, Vigo throws in 23. So the number is the number is 33. I see Byzantine Soldier has 43. Vigo has 23. Vigo, I know, super chatted. Byzantine Soldier super chatted. So you guys are both 10 away. 33 Illuminati confirmed. Exactly. Oh, Thomas had 31. I missed that one. 31. Oh, yeah, I see that. Okay, Thomas wins. Thomas 777803. You are the winner today, my man. Thomas is the winner. 31 is definitely the closest. Byzantine Soldier, I think you were 23 or 43. Somebody was 43. Oh, Crisp Knob was, 31 is definitely the closest. 33. It was the age of Christ, guys. It was the age of Christ, 33. Yep, Thomas wins. Thomas, you got to email me, bro. And you got to email me tonight so I can get this out and sent tomorrow so you can get it before Christmas. Who picked 33? You're a Mason. I am. Oh gosh. I actually had somebody who messaged me accusing me of being a Freemason because something I did with my hands during a stream. Organized Insanity said I didn't pick 33. I thought it was too obvious. Where's Thomas at? I don't even see Thomas in the chat anymore. Thomas, you got to email me your actual name, first and last, so I can ship it. Pusherfish base. There he is. All right, here's my email, Thomas. Church of the Eternal Logos at gmail.com. Just email me at churchoftheeternallogos at gmail.com. Now we're going to have a bunch of people emailing me pretending that they're you, Thomas. Dox yourself and get a free book. Well, it's only with me though. I'm not going to be putting people's stuff out there. Yeah, right. I'll start doing these more. Once I get a new shipload of books in, we can start doing more where if we reach the goal, I'll pick a number and then send one out to people. I think that it is a fun game. Hello, sir. My name is Thomas. All right, Thomas. Email me, brother. I really do. I want to get it shipped out so you can get it before Christmas. Kristen. No, seriously, somebody, I forget what it was. I was like doing this or there's a guy and he was arguing that I'm a fake Orthodox Freemason. I was like, what? What? All right. Thomas lives in India. I'm not shipping to India. So if you live in India, Thomas, I'm not going to be able to send that one out. All right. I haven't got an email from Thomas yet. So, all right. Well, Thomas, I'm going to hop off here. Hey, a special thank you goes out to David for sponsoring today's stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I thought it was going to be, I thought it'd be a popular, interesting topic. We haven't tackled dragons before on the channel, but hopefully after today's stream, you guys feel like you got a better grasp on the topic and, can understand it a little bit better and see the nuances and the variations and the possible literal historicity of dragons. I'm not even opposed to it. DPH thinks that many people want his book who are unwilling to pay for it, that they'd bomb his email. Potential. All right, Thomas. Well, email me, brother, tonight. Okay. Thomas said, I'm not at my computer at the moment. I'll get to you in a shot. All right. Sounds good, brother. Christian Zionism is Judaism says, I think what you do is important, man. You're a lot easier to watch than the other big ortho people. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Oh, send us to Orthodox Ethos. Okay. Let me look at the Orthodox Ethos live. Is that the only one of our friends that is live? Let me see here. Redirect. Where's the Orthodox Ethos? I don't even see him live right now. Oh, Orthodox Ethos doesn't allow me to redirect to them. It says, ask Orthodox Ethos to add you to their live direct list in community settings. So I can't send you guys to Orthodox Ethos. But yeah, just go raid Father Peter Hears. But anyways, thank you guys so much. Merry Christmas to all of you. Again, a special thank you goes out to David for sponsoring today's stream. And FDA's on Buck. Oh, okay. I just put in Buck Johnson. So FDA's over there. So I'm going to send you guys over to FDA and Buck Johnson. Thank you guys so much. God bless you all. Merry Christmas, blessed nativity. And I'll see you guys Thursday with the Christmas movie review with BLA, which I'm excited about. So I'll talk to you guys then. As always, until then, God bless.